Alrighty. Okay, all right. You're about ready. Praise the Most High. Hmm. Okay. Take this off, see what happens. All righty. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, protect today's message. Aman. Aman, aman, aman. Again, welcome. Olá, meu nome é Kofi, como está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi, ça va? Ni hao, namaste, osaya nikitabuya, mahayo, I see you, manut, wagwan, kamsamida, aloha, ciao, on son, privet, habarigani, akwaba, madaase, etc. Jambo, mimidi kofi, ni defra kukatana de wewe, boker tov, boker tav, greetings, salutations, grand rising, bak wadatav, laishan shalom, barakalat shem yichava, na'aik of aik, chilit to serve Christ, tida, to sadaik, tida, yachava to sadaik, at yachava shalom, peace and blessings. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time. By being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. We thank you, we appreciate you. Hopefully all is well with thee and thine house. It is Sunday, November the 30th. We're continuing in this series that we've been doing for some time. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. And if it's your first time, one time of many, hopefully you're with us. We once again give all honor and praise to the Most High. We give all praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya. We praise Him for allowing us to have such a great ministerial staff, moderators, SOC, those who are with us once again, first time, one time of many. If you agree with us, you disagree with us, if you're here to joan, cap, troll, or learn, love, etc., we are appreciative for you being here, because even those persons who come here and try to diabolically at times mess with us and try to make us feel less than and things of that nature, I have learned that what Savada says is true, which is that when persons say all manner of evil against you and persecution against you and are upset and frustrated with you simply because you're actually just telling the truth, then we're on point. We're on point. We're exactly where we are supposed to be. We are exactly where we need to be. We are doing exactly what we're supposed to do a lot of the time. Now, if you are getting persons coming at you because you wilding or something, okay, that's different. But if you're doing what you're supposed to do and persons are ready to persecute you because you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do, you know, let that be whatever. You know, get you some sleep, rejoice, and be exceeding glad. And so just to let you know, when you guys do come through and say all the craziness and things of that nature, it does excite me. Not because I need to argue you down. It excites me because it lets me know that, oh, okay, we struck a nerve. And hit dogs do holler. Right. Now, I will be respectful of those who are coming on. I try to respect different cultures, different belief systems, etc., and prayerfully be able to give back the same. Even if you're somewhat disrespectful, I try my best to still allow. Now, we do have moderators that run this, just to make it clear. So even if, you know, I do try to allow, you must comprehend the moderators are there to protect not only me, but the flow of service, if you will, the flow of the live session. So if somebody comes on here doing certain things, you know, we've been asking them to step back just a little bit, but yes, they are an extension of myself. If they do something that goes a little off whack, we will try to handle it, but really for real, they're doing what, you know, we need to be done to make sure that we can get through this. So much love to everybody, much respect to everybody on all the different platforms, even the platforms of those of you who are watching this later on. Thank you again. Announcement, basically tomorrow we'll have early rising Bible study session. We'll have our live session in the Rising, 8 a.m. New York time. And tomorrow evening, we'll have our Real Talk session in the evening, 8 p.m. New York time. And then we should have our project management meeting with everybody on Zoom. Alrighty. But much love to you. Hopefully all is well. Be safe. those of you who do celebrate Thanksgiving and all that stuff, we don't necessarily do so, but those who do, just be safe on your way back and all those things. We hope and pray for your safety, and we hope and pray that you were able to enjoy whatever it is you were trying to enjoy. All right. Okay. And those who came over from ministerial prayer and those who are still on, by the way, shout out to you all. Thank you. Salute. We appreciate you all. Okay. And we also had a great time yesterday for the Brothers in Black. Right. We do that once a year. Official thing for the brothers. We come out, we dress in solidarity. Thank you, brothers, for showing up. Thank you, sisters, for showing support. Excellent word from the elders. Excellent word from the ministers. Excellent word from everybody who was there. Thank you for the encouragement. Much love and respect. Women in Red is coming up at the end of December, so we're looking for a similar, if not even greater, turnout for that. So prayerfully be able to join us for that. It is recorded, by the way. You can find it on YouTube. I believe I did post it on Patreon as well. And on Patreon, just to let it be known as well, the notes that we're going to go over for the live session today, the notes are posted. So if you're wondering where did I get it, or you'd like to read further, if you're a Patreon member, it's already there for you. If not, I will try my best when I have the opportunity to get it to you. Also, those who are still waiting for your calendar, we had to redevelop the way that we put the link out. So some of you haven't gotten it. It's because we're trying to redo the way the link works or whatever. So we should have the link for you guys very soon, and you guys should be able to go ahead and look at it. Thank you for your support in that. All righty. So let's go ahead. If you're able to rise to your feet in reverence of Yahweh's word, can I explain the T? So it's not really a T. It's like it's supposed to be it's really a tav, but it's somebody, when they made it there, they did something specific. It's kind of a thing, but the person who created it. So it's really a tav. Really, if you were to technically, it's if we were talking about original. So if you will, it's kind of like a, what do you call that? Not Sanskrit, but manuscript, of course, but whatever that is, I forget what you call it. Kind of calligraphy. Somebody taking a little bit of license, but technically it's this. So yeah, so it's technically the tav, right? The last character of the alphabet or whatever, and but somebody made it, for me, specifics and stuff like that. So, and I'm thankful and grateful. And if you like the tav, or if you or things that I wear that are similar to this, Sister Greta is the person that makes that for us. Our sister down in Florida, a brother in Mississippi, Brother Dwayne, he makes some of the copper products and stuff that you see myself wearing as well. If you're interested in it and interested in supporting, then feel free to do so. All right, so we're going to go ahead, get ready to say our Bible pledge and jump right in this series. Thank you all once again. Those who are in England or anywhere, really, if you're international, we're trying to redo our stuff in England, and not just that, but just have a lot of persons who are not in the States meet up with the persons that are in England. Even some persons in the States, if you'd like to come, there's room for you as well. We're going to try to make that a little bigger, and we're also going to try to get that back on track. But so I did send out to those who are in England, I did send out a message just seeing, if the same time works, or if there's a better time, or even a different day, and we'll try to see if we can make that work. But let's go ahead and get into this for today. Thank you again. We appreciate you, we honor you, and much love and respect to everybody. So how's everybody doing? And if you're able to reverence the word of Yahweh, rising to your feet, or however you're able to reverence the word, thank you for doing so. How you doing, Sister Carla? How you doing? Beautiful rising to you, Sister Dawn. How you doing, Callum? Shalom. Shalom to everybody. Big Shark already got his stuff taken down, acting crazy. Okay, cool. How you doing, Mr. Trider? Got yourself taken down already. All right, cool. Thank y'all. I'm not sure, by the way, if there's others that are on here already on this platform. I can't see. So hopefully I didn't miss anybody. Minister Castleberry, thank you for being on. How you doing? Also, too, shout out to Pastor Absalom Hamilton. Pastor Hamilton, he and his wife celebrated, I believe, last night. And I believe in Detroit, celebrated 30 years of 30-year anniversary, right? They go back and forth between Detroit and North Carolina with the assembly that God put them over. So all praises to the Most High. 30 years is nothing to sneeze at when most persons can't make it 30 days. Right? So we give all honor and praise to the Most High for that. How you doing, Temple of Blood and Honey? How you doing, Sister Celine? How you doing, Sister Deborah? How you doing, Mario Too Good? How you doing, Sister Beverly, Mr. King, Hitman, Freedom, Kelvin or Kelvine, Bethany, Money B, Sister Deborah, Sir H. Estelle, Vermani Arsachi, One Temple Jackson, Robert Jones, Ketka Hiddes, possibly. Focus Westcott, feel like long time no talk to you. How you doing? If that's the same Focus Westcott, I believe it is. Ladies and Marvin Powell, user 792-8876, etc. True Trillion, Clodar, Dark Lord, Sparkle Girl, Izan, Lim Yao, Jazz, Insight, Universe, Pity, Metamorphosis, Tahiti, Lottie Dottie, everybody. If I miss you, once again, please forgive me. Thank you for being on. How you doing? How you doing, Dominique? Dominique, I believe you sent the stuff for the calendar. So I'm gonna double check and make sure we have your information to make sure that we can send it to you virtually, because it's a virtual calendar now. And as we said, we'll try to start sending the physical ones as soon as we can in January at the top of the year. All right. So thank you everybody for being on. We appreciate you. Let's go ahead and get started. Get ready to do our Bible pledge and jump right in. You can put your Bible in your right hand, or your device in your right hand, or just put your right hand in the air if you prefer. And just repeat after me. This is my Bible. This is my sword. In this will I trust. For Yahshua is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible, and this is Yah's word. Hashem Yechavach Aman, which is Yechavashim, his name, his authority, let it be done unto us. You may be seated, or go back to what you were doing in the presence of the Most High. All right, so once again, all praises to the Most High. Once again, we're continuing in this series called Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the Lie. A couple days ago, on Friday, we talked about, specifically in this series, once again called Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the Lie, we spoke specifically on the lie, which is the science of religion. The religion of science. The religion of science. Now we could even go back and talk about the science of religion, because a lot of persons who say that what we so-called religion, or persons don't know what religion means, but what we call religion, which usually we say is, what somebody believes, which is not necessarily even how religion works. But that being said, what we think religion means, a lot of persons forget that a lot of scientists have to have religious belief, if that's the case, because a lot of scientists have to be able to have faith, right? They have to have faith, and they do these works having faith in something that may or may not necessarily, exist or be what they believe it to be, right? So one of the things that we do here, and how you doing, Christina? So we talked about that on Friday, the science of religion. We ended up talking a lot about Charles Darwin. He comes up quite a bit, because if you're going to be honest about lies, then you have to be honest about the lie of Charles Darwin. Number one, we have to be honest about him even being somebody who was educated, because a lot of persons, what they'll do is they'll say, see, you guys don't believe in science, which is not true. They'll say, you don't believe in dinosaurs. There are some persons, usually Christians, that don't believe in dinosaurs. The Bible talks a lot about dinosaurs, so therefore if you believe in the Bible, you should believe in dinosaurs. They'll say a lot of different things. Okay, well, you don't have a degree. Actually, I have, I have one official, and I've been to enough schools where I can scrounge together enough credits and probably get several more. I just don't care about it. It's not something that the Most High is using to uplift what we're doing. With that being said, if you have a degree of knowledge, cool. There's 360 degrees in a circle. If you're a Mason, you got 32 more degrees to go. And a lot of you are in the Masonic thought process, etc. But a lot of persons, they try to use these different things as ad hominem to be able to further their straw man or their gaslighting, not realizing that while trying to say that you are unaware of how to be apologetically sound, they have no clue that they've actually steeped deeper into Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So you have a lot of persons who speak on all these different things, and a lot of persons who talk on all these different things, and a lot of persons who allow, if I'll be honest, these different things, right? Hey, that's the best you got. Al, whatever your name is, that the best that you got? Come on, man. Y'all trolls got to get it together. Y'all sorry on the trolling, right? Right? Miss me with that. Right, y'all sorry on the shoulder. That being said, a lot of persons are unaware how these items work, how these things work, how growth works, et cetera, et cetera. Right? So if we're going to talk about this stuff today, we're going to focus on Darwin and friends, if you will. Like the Batman and friends and the super friends and all this stuff. Well, Charles Darwin not only did a lot of different things, which we showed already. So once again, if you'd like to go through our playlist and you know, in these live sessions, and if you'd like to go through our podcasts and different things to listen to the recording, you are more than welcome to do so. Well, when you get a chance, you can go on that. I am going to bring up a lot of that stuff again, but we want to talk about Darwin and the effect that Charles Darwin has had. And a lot of persons don't even know Charles Darwin's background. They don't care about his education. They don't care that his education is not in science. I'm going to say it again. You would think that the biggest scientist, his actual education would be in science. Matter of fact, you would think that he actually was really educated. The reality is that he didn't really get educated. Right? So Charles Darwin's not even really educated. Everybody will talk all the stuff for him and keep up for him and things like that, but he's not even really educated, and definitely not educated in the manner that a lot of you believe that he is. Right? So when you're seeing all these things, you're talking about Mormon. Me, I'm too black to be a Mormon and be allowed to, you know, speak in front of people and stuff like that. You know, I'm not white and likes him. You know, maybe you're talking about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin's not even close to being a Mormon, although he shares Mormon beliefs because hey, he hates black people. You know, ultimately. Now, and Charles Darwin is going to be an interesting conversation because Charles Darwin is what we would call today. You probably would allow Charles Darwin to actually be what's called a leftist. Right? You would probably call him what's called a leftist. Right? And a lot of persons don't even realize that. Like you would call him a leftist. Right? And the reality, so when I say that, I mean, if Charles Darwin, what he says is what persons say today. Matter of fact, Charles Darwin, believe it or not, while being racist, is also an abolitionist. You know, be upon thee as well, right? Right? So, and how you doing, Brother Keith? So a lot of persons don't even know that Charles Darwin, while being racist, is also an abolitionist, which opens up a whole bunch of different discussion because, once again, the thought process is if you're on the left, you are something, and if you're on the right, you're something else. But Charles Darwin, if you do some research, is actually an abolitionist. And we're going to get into this stuff today. Right? We're going to read some of his stuff outright. We're going to go line upon line, precept upon what he himself has put down in front of, you know, has written out for you, and what his cousin has written out for you. And for those who followed them, what they wrote out, we'll talk about his grandfather / father, right? Or I'm sorry, his grandfather / uncle. We'll talk about his father. You know, we can speak on all these different things, but persons are not aware. Matter of fact, Charles Darwin, if you talk about his married life, you have to talk about the fact that his cousin, who wrote the book on eugenics, is also his brother-in-law. Now these persons are supposed to be the standard, and these are the persons who have, and we'll show you, right? I'm gonna tell you, give you the crumbs. You can go read it for yourself. How you doing, Sister Bet? Right? How you doing, James? So with all these different things, we're speaking specifically on today in this series called Reversing the Curse, means revisiting the lie. Specifically today, we are going to talk about, you know, Darwin and friends. How did they take these things? So if you were somebody who was on here Friday and you were really highly upset about the fact that we were literally showing you that persons keep changing stuff and lying to you and telling you, you know, oh no, you know, this, that, and even persons, when we talk about Darwin's book, you know, the book that's actually named The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That's the actual title of his book. And persons get upset when we mention that. Persons say, you know, even on the left, because, you know, Charles Darwin, once again, he's a leftist, right? Charles Darwin was an abolitionist who hated black people. Go figure. And for some, you think this is really weird. Now, I forget the person's name. I'm going to give you enough information where you can look him up for yourself. There was a man who was a staunch abolitionist, and so you would think, right? Which means that you would think that that person, since they want to get rid of chattel slavery, that means that they like so-called black persons, right? One would surmise. Usually, that's how we've been taught, right? That every abolitionist that you ever read about, see, that we got to stop doing this, by the way. Every abolitionist is not John Brown, right? Just like every black person that you meet that's 70 years old didn't march with King. You know what I'm saying? Like we had a weird philosophy that somebody gives a title, or even sometimes somebody puts a title on themselves or bestows a title upon their family to make sure that they throw you off the scent of their foolishness. And you say, oh, they're an abolitionist, right? Because they showed up to some meetings at the end or did some stuff. But there was this guy who was actually a staunch abolitionist. And then he actually, um, after after fighting that, he said that he was hearing from his God. And this is not me making stuff up. It's going to sound weird. It's going to sound like there's no way somebody actually would do what I'm saying. But I promise you, what I'm about to say is very real. And if it shows you the mindset, and it also shows you being double-minded is, in fact, a lot, runs a lot deeper than a lot of persons believe. So this person, right, was a staunch abolitionist. I forget his name, but I'm giving you that stuff. You can look him up for yourself. Just put this in your Google machine, whatever. He goes afterwards and says that he's hearing from the ghost of Benjamin Franklin, and I believe of Thomas Jefferson. It's either Jefferson or Washington. I believe it's Thomas Jefferson, who are two slave owners. This abolitionist says that he heard from God, and God told him to listen to Thomas Jefferson, or gave him the ghost of Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. Like we said, we got the Holy Ghost. He said he had the Jefferson ghost and the Franklin ghost. And he started a little tiny religious movement in which he said that that God had told him to build a machine, a mechanical Jesus. This is why I'm giving you the information. You can look this up. There's an abolitionist now who says that he's hearing from the Holy Spirit in the manner of the ghost of Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, slave owners, and he's supposed to build a machine to be like Jesus so that he can do what Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson did. These are the persons that we're told to look up to. These are the persons who we say we admire. They built the West. They this and that. These persons are out of their mind. They're out of their mind. Thomas Jefferson could speak many languages. Granted, he could speak fluently more languages than I can. Granted. But he's telling you that black women are nasty, disgusting beasts who are stupid and slow and hairy and ugly and this and that, while he's R-wording them. He's out of his mind, or he's a liar. Either way, he shouldn't be our standard. Right? Right? If you go to Monticello, his manor, and you look out and you'll see what he helped develop as the University of Virginia. If you went to the University of Virginia, he developed it to be something that was pro-chattel slavery, that was anti-Christ, because he didn't even believe in Christ. Matter of fact, if you know his book, those of you who are part of SOC University, we've gone over it a little bit. We're going to go over it even more. But if you go over the book that he wrote, that now they call the Jefferson Bible, which basically is just a different version of the slave Bible, and he took out everything. He writes in 4 languages the so-called Gospels, which really there's 3 synoptic Gospels if you believe in the Gospel. The Gospel is really the Godspell. But if you believe in it, there's really 3. It's not 4. It's just Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John is considered to be second if you're using the term gospel the way they do in the church. That being said, though, he writes these 4, but he erases anything that has to do with miracles. He erases anything that makes Yehoshua more than a man, right? And he erases anything that says that he should treat his fellow man or his chattel slaves with respect. Which basically is the same thing they did with the slave Bible. These are the persons that we lift up. Charles Darwin is somebody that we lift up. These are the persons in this era, right? Charles Darwin, his book, once again called The Origin of Species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. That was something that he wrote in 1859. The other book we're going to talk about mainly today, he wrote in 1871. Thomas Jefferson is your president, and you're right, in 1804 or 18 somewhere around there, right? Benjamin Franklin is there late 1700s, dies in early 1800s, something like that, right? So these persons, are the ones who you're looking up to, and they're telling you be like him. Benjamin Franklin, he was so smart because he put a key on a thing, and he discovered electricity. How do you discover electricity? But in Kemet, thousands of years before, they have streetlights. Not based off of fire either, sometimes even based off of what? Electricity. How do you discover bombs when Chinese persons thousands of years ago and Africans thousands of years ago were using bombs and having what today you might call a firework, right? Like these are things, we're told all this stuff because we're told that we have no thought process, we have no history. These are the persons who are the standard bearers for this wicked system are the persons that keep trying to tell you and I that we can't know anything. This is why a lot of persons come on and troll and they say stuff like, oh, your hair is dirty because it's locked. But you're not supposed to have hair that looks like this be attached to anybody who knows anything. This is what they believe. And having been led as we believe, right, we know that that's way off. Right? We believe what persons like to bring up on the right and the left, but still use it against us, that you should judge somebody by the content of their character. We do believe that. And if character-wise we've been doing stuff for a really long time, maybe, just maybe, we should be treated as persons who are not just coming to the party yesterday, but actually doing what the Most High says every day. And Shalom, I'm sorry I missed you. Is it 7XGAGYA? And how you doing, Shalom? Peace to you, Detroit, or Shalom to you. How you doing, Detroit? Best Hunter. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for any likes, shares, subscriptions, and the notification tab, any donations of time, talent, effort, energy. And yes, even those of you who do donate to help us with things behind the scenes, including even financially. And when I say financially, even including money. Yes, we do thank you guys for those who help us with what we're doing. This is not, for us, it's not just virtual, it is reality. And we make sure that we're doing things around the world. Please, ma'am, please, sir, also don't forget that we are also still raising funds and stuff for the children that we're helping out in Africa now as well, on top of all the different things that we have going on with Yah's Land Project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so thank you again for being on. We're in this series, Reversing the Curse means Revisiting the Lie. Today, we're focusing on Darwin and friends. So once again, is Charles Darwin a abolitionist? Technically, he's not even an abolitionist, but they try to make him an abolitionist because really, if we've been honest, let's be honest. We're going to tell the truth. There's not a truth, there's the truth. Charles Darwin did, in fact, think that it was novel that England would go ahead and get rid of slavery. Even though England technically didn't get rid of slavery in the early 1800s, they just didn't allow you to bring the slaves to England, but that's okay because they never really were bringing the slaves to England. I mean, they had some, but all their slaves usually were in the Caribbean or other places around the world where they had, colonies. They couldn't fit, you can't fit the amount of slaves that England had hold of in England. England for real, just like many of these countries and many of these persons that are above you, like Bezos, everybody's like, Jeff Bezos, he has the power. Jeff Bezos is one dude. We have allowed him, by you thinking you still got to bow down to him and do everything through him, we have allowed him to have more power, but really all he has is power of influence. If you were to stop being influenced by that system, you would stop, right, including even money that's not even real, you would stop, you would be done today, right? That's the secret, right? That's the true secret. I know there was a book written, The Secret, right? And I'm not saying that you can't manifest things by making sure that you think positively. What I'm saying, though, is that faith without works doesn't have any life. If we actually gave life into the thought process, to the mindset, and to the reality that, hey, if we literally have the ability, if we would use it, it's different. That's a different conversation. But we do actually have the ability, if we felt like it, to be like, you know what? We don't have to bow down to persons that hate. We don't have to help them out. We don't have to give them money. We don't have to put money in their pocket. We have the ability to say, no, we're done with that. At any time. And at any time, you have the right to at least start thinking differently. Remember, we talked about yesterday, brain power is different than mind power, right? You don't have to just use your brain, right, only. You can use your mind, and your mind, part of your mind is your brain, right? You can mind, like you mind your manners, you can mind your life. And we can begin to actually start taking things seriously and properly and start supporting each other and supporting those who are real ones who want righteousness for all, rather than persons who want to live off of the depletion of some. Right, how you doing, Sister Greta? If I didn't say so already, how you doing, Sapphire? Forgive me if I didn't say anything. Thank y'all for the likes, the shares, hitting the notification tab, all that great stuff. We appreciate you so very much. So now that we're talking about that, we have that in place and we have that in order, and now that we're having that part of the conversation and everything, excuse me, I'm sorry. Now that we had it in place, we have the Oh yeah, so let's get into Charles Darwin. So we're gonna hash up some of the things from Friday. Charles Darwin, once again, is what? Charles Darwin is, in fact, a Charles Darwin is in fact somebody who wrote a book that most persons have only been told part of the title for, and most persons only know part of his story, and so most persons still allow a lot of his rhetoric to keep on running through, and your children to keep being taught the same thing. By the way, for you guys who have children in school, do your children get taught about Charles Darwin? Right? If your children are still in school, do your children still get taught about Charles Darwin? You think they still get taught? If your children are still in school, do your children get taught that Charles Darwin is a scientific expert, even though he never got a degree in science? Right? Yeah, is Charles Darwin look at somebody that we should look up to, even though Charles Darwin was out there, more than likely the result of I don't know, they try to be tricky with this word. Is it incest or inbreeding, whatever? But he's probably the result of that, and if not, he dang sure his children are the result of that. Had 10 children, 3 of them didn't even make it, unfortunately, and the other 7 didn't have a chance because their family was so messed up with either what you want to call inbreeding or incest. They were so messed up that basically they lived really, really bad lives. Do your children get taught any of that? Were you taught any of those things? Were you taught that Charles Darwin's only degree, really, which is a degree his family paid for, but his only degree was actually in preaching? Charles Darwin was supposed to be in line to preach, and he began to preach and proclaim racism, white supremacy, tied up and wrapped up nice and neatly in what you now call evolution. Right? Did you know that Charles Darwin is a disciple of Carl Linnaeus? And that Carl Linnaeus, you have to figure out that Carl Linnaeus is the one that made the word race and species interchangeable. And him and his boys were the ones who came up with the concept and the thought process that says that different human beings came from different races, or different human beings came from different species. So even when you say there's one human race, you can't use evolution to prove that there's one human race, because that's not what evolution teaches. Now they've tried to reverse it because, remember, they looked all over the place. See, it's a theory anyways. First of all, you guys know that evolution is a theory, right? It's called the evolution or the evolutional theory, or the theory of evolution. Evolution is not a truth. It is a fact, but remember, fact does not mean truth. Fact means that somebody is presenting you an observation, right? If you go to court, there'll be 2 sides, the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution and defense will both give many facts, many exhibits, things to look at. But the exhibits do not tell us the truth. The exhibits are supposed to inform us enough that hopefully we can use them to get towards truth. Excuse me. In other words, a theory is like this. If I have point A and point C, the theory is point B. Point B, I might not know how to get from A to C, but point B at least will get me where I need to get now. But theories, a lot of these theories that you live by have been disproven. Sir Isaac Newton came up with something called what? The theory of gravity. Do you know that the theory of gravity is not even a real thing anymore, although they still teach it? Somebody will say, no, that's not true. That's not, yeah, it is true. The theory of gravity, because a lot of you think the theory of gravity just means what comes up must come down, which isn't even necessarily the truth, because even if you believe in this part of it, Sir Isaac Newton came up with the theory of gravity when he got hit in the head with an apple. If that's what you believe, right? So if that's what you believe, it wasn't what goes up must come down. It was something came down upon his head, number 1. Number 2, the theory is not just supposed to be about what goes up, what must come down. But the theory of gravity is supposed to talk about what holds things in place, what holds nature in place, what allows things to move, what allows rate of speed, all these different things. This is what the theory of gravity is. The theory of gravity, the reason why Einstein was such a big deal, once again, just like Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and all these persons will be memorialized way after they died, and everybody will pretend that everybody was on the same page. When Albert Einstein came up with the theory of relativity, he was hated by many. Many persons thought he was dumb. Many persons said there's no way that what you're saying it can be correct. Why? Because persons who were making money off of the theory of gravity, if you start changing that, that means there's a whole bunch. There's universities making money off of the theory of gravity at the time. If you introduce the theory of relativity, right, you're going to lose this money. There's persons who are going around and making speeches on the theory of gravity. If you introduce a theory of relativity and say that this is correct, we have to go and stop doing that. There's students who are in the middle of our classes. They're about to graduate, and for 4 years they've been listening to us give lectures on the theory of gravity. If you tell us that the theory of gravity is not real, and then show it, right? So we introduced this even on Friday. How there's a theory that have been going around for the longest time that the reason why Komodo dragons can hunt down their prey and walk, they always walk after them slow and they can't run that fast and this and that. Well, the only way they can do that is because they bite into them and the animals go slow. But we actually know Komodo dragons run extremely fast, number one. They may not have as much endurance, even though they have way more endurance than you think, but they can run extremely fast, number one. So a Komodo dragon is not able to not chase down food. But somebody told you that off of one-time thing they saw. Just like they tell you that rhinoceroses are always solitary animals. Come to find out that rhinos in the middle of the night meet up just about every night in huge herds. They might be alone during the day, but they come together at night. All right? Or you heard that, there were alpha wolves, alpha males, alpha females and stuff. And really the only term alpha actually comes from a really old Greek person who was observing something called pecking order, where hens peck at other hens, not any just chicken. Hens peck at other hens to establish who is the alpha, or in the alphabet, meaning the first character, who is the first. Right? There is no such thing as an alpha male with a wolf, because wolves have a couple that runs the whole thing, a mother and a father. And when the males get to a certain age, they start wilding out, right? And they want to mate and do things like that. They get kicked out, right? And then they go somewhere else. And if the daughters want to go ahead and mate with some wolf that comes around there, they get kicked out, because if they're going to keep the pups, they got to go ahead and start a whole new different path. Right, we've been taught all these things, but if somebody introduces these things and starts telling you, wait a minute, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. A lot of person's livelihood is based off of this stuff. Matter of fact, preachers don't want to do stuff like Q&A and answer questions and be stuff, because you had your whole life based off of stuff that's a lie. Some of y'all just finished having Thanksgiving services. Thanksgiving's not only not in the Bible, right? Well, somebody says the word Thanksgiving is, but the word Thanksgiving in in the English that you're using in those 611 King James versions, stuff like that you're now using and not knowing what they mean, that actually means to fast. And the only reason why you think Thanksgiving is a holiday because somebody lied to you and told you Abraham Lincoln specifically made a federal holiday out of a lie. Because he was out there offing Native Americans, saying he didn't care about black folk, and trying to still uplift white persons. If Abraham Lincoln had lived just a little bit longer, you probably would give more credit to what he actually said and did. 13th Amendment, he left a loophole to where you could still enslave persons. Do you know that Abraham Lincoln, when they finally left in the Confederate States, those who had seceded, he was like, oh, okay, as long as 10% of you guys, right, will vote, to come back into the Union, we'll let you back in. It was when he lost his life that his party, the Republican Party at the time, came behind him and said, no, they got to do 50%. These are traitors. We can't just let them back in. But Abraham Lincoln had said, even before the war started, right? He's not trying to make sure that black persons could become free. Matter of fact, during the war, he said, if I could win the war and free 0 slaves, I would do so. He said, if I could win the war and free all the slaves, I would do so. He said, if I could win the war and some persons would be free and some persons would be slave, I would do so. Because what does every president have to say when they first come in? What do they swear? Those of you who are in the military, you swear the same thing. Those of you who did public office, and you did the same thing, right? What do you swear? You say, what? I state your name. You solemnly swear to support and defend not people, not persons, and not especially black persons who weren't even considered to be persons at that time, right? You are there to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. But, right, if we're going to reverse the curse, we have to revisit the lies. And persons don't like it when we go back and we say, hey, there's a reason why this stuff still is there. There's a reason why these undertones. There's a reason why everybody's so busy saying, stop revisiting the lie. The lies don't matter. Only the truth of us being together. But if you're together in a lie, then the truth doesn't matter anyways. Right? Yeah, Christ Mass, yeah. Which, by the way, could be Christos Mass, which could be more Christ adding on to Christ, or you could say this is a Mass for Christ, etc., right? Different ways you can look at that. But that being said, when you have that Christ Mass, nowhere in the Bible does it support it. Matter of fact, the Bible speaks against it. If you know what Saturnalia, winter solstice, and all that stuff is, it speaks against it, specifically in Jeremiah chapter 10, verses 1 through 5. But persons would rather live in the lie, and then what they do is they use tricky language and they say, you're a snowflake, you're this. Why is it that you always have to bring this stuff up? If you're living in a lie, then you should bring, right? Then the question is, if you know you're living in a lie, but you will still uphold it, why is it that you're willing to either be blind or to blind others? And we know that blind leaders, they lead other blind persons into ditches. So when you speak on truth, when you live truth, you must recognize that you become dangerous. Right? And this is one of the reasons why they have come for all of our leaders. This is one of the reasons why they have told you to do everything else except build for yourself. We love to talk about the first black man to do this and the first black woman to do this, and even though all this stuff was done in Kemet, it was done in Israel, it was done in Mesopotamia, it was done in Africa, it was done here, and done there. But we love to keep telling everybody, you know, the first black person to do this thing that we actually had to do a long time ago, because in your mind, once again, the system you're in tells you that you have never done anything. Charles Darwin and friends helped with that. They helped to influence that. And this is not hundreds of years ago. This is 1859 when he wrote, once again, his book entitled The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. He wrote what he wrote about mankind because he was trying. Remember, there was another guy who was actually learning stuff at the same time, but they chose Charles Darwin and pushed him, right? Then the Linnean Society, Royal Society, geologists supported him, etc. Everybody came together to support this because you had to support racism, white supremacy, which is really being anti-Negro. And if you know who the Negro is, especially biblically speaking, you understand what's going on, right? So, so a lot of persons don't like to revisit lies. But if you're going to live in truth, you have to at least admit if you're living in a lie. If you're not aware you're living in a lie, that's one thing. But you have to stop this thing where it's like, oh, you guys just focus on race. Why are you always focused on race? If the United States Corporation is built on race, so-called species, and one species or one race being lesser or lower than the other, if that's what you were taught in school, if nurses are still being taught that black women feel less pain because of the color of their skin, if gynecologists built what they built on, right, the so-called father of modern medicine, they always change who that is, but the father of modern medicine, so to speak, who helped to develop something that you call gynecology and use all the stirrups and different things that they use on sisters and stuff like that, right? They did that by making sure that they experimented on black women with no anesthesia, and making sure that they were using all types of torture products to see what they could do, right? The same persons who were doing this, right, also have in their belief system, it's okay to put women on their back when they have children because it was a fetish by a French king where he liked to see women give birth. He got off on it, right? Thank you, Vibes. I appreciate that. Yes, I am. Is that your way of saying hello, by the way? Shalom to you, right? How you doing, Sean? I'm sorry, am I saying, I don't know if I'm saying it right, Shani or Shandy? I'm not sure. Please forgive me. Thank you for being on, right? So we should tell the truth. We should tell the truth. Regardless of what your belief is, you should tell the truth. Telling the truth doesn't make one a snowflake. Shandy like Annie, okay, I'll try to remember that. Thank you. So we should tell the truth. Why is it that telling the truth scares you unless you want to keep upholding a system based off of a lie? Or, watch this, for many of us, we survive, or we think we survive, off of this system. So, hey, a lot of us, for example, there was a so-called, I hate using these terms, these colonial and social constructs, but, the term mixed race. There's this girl whose mother is black, and if you look at her, she passes for white a lot. And so she got caught up in saying all this racist stuff, and then persons found out that her mother was black. And guess what she said? And she's not even off on this, as much as you think. She goes, well, my mommy loved me enough to make sure she didn't give me a black name so that I could make something out of myself. And everybody got mad, and it hit my flesh a tiny bit. It singed a little bit. That being said, though, I know how the game works. I said, oh, I know what that is. Because a lot of our people and a lot of persons who come from other countries, they want to make sure that their children get jobs. So the ghetto names, Jaquetta, which is not actually a ghetto name, it's actually a cultural name, but Jaquetta or forgive me, this is a beautiful name, but they'll try to act like it's too black, Anais, right? It's actually Anai coming from Hebrew, right? Or different things like that. They'll say, oh, no, we need to give him a better name. Let's name him John. Let us name her Susan. Let us name her Lily. Let us name her this and that. Let us name her Lillian. Let us name her, because we want to make sure that she fits in. I'm not saying you can't name your children those things. I'm just saying that's why a lot of persons name their children names that are supposedly Eurocentric or white-sounding names, because you want a lot of persons say, literally, this is not something made up. Persons have written this out for themselves. Go look. I want my children to have a better chance. So I want them to be able, before the job interview, I want them to at least get the interview, to have a foot in the door. So I will literally authorize them, because that's what name means. It means authority. So I will literally make sure that their name is something that shows that the system gives them authority. And then when they show up, well, maybe even though they technically don't have authority, maybe they'll have a foot in the door. Right? You see what I'm saying? So and I'm with you on vibes, by the way. Definitely. If you even know what Adamach means, which is where Adam or Adam comes from, you find out that you're, pretty much on point. That being said, I'm not using so-called race, color, so-called color, white, black, and everything in between to try and tell everybody why somebody's better than anybody either way. If you do that, you're not correct. That's not what this is about, right? That being said, we do have to be honest about the system we're in. Okay? So if you're going to be dishonest about the system you're in, then you're just straight up dishonest. So I bring to you, if you will, Exhibit A. Right? I bring to you, if you will, Exhibit A. And in Exhibit A, we're going to once again talk about a different book. We've been talking about this book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Survival of Favorite Races in the Struggle for Life. And once again, all these notes that I have, if you're part of the Patreon family, this stuff is already posted for you. So you literally, if you wanted to, could go to Patreon, listen, and just kind of flip through these and try to figure out where we are. Right? Right? I'm not sure if I'm going to go in exact order of what you guys see there, but you can flip through those things and see it for yourself. So we're gonna do a little bit of moving about a bit, right? But we're gonna introduce another book to you today. This one written in 1871, so 1859, by the way, right before 1860 when Southern states started to secede, right? 1861 through 65 is when the Civil War happens, right? 1865 is when Lincoln is voted in again, but then gets shot. 1866 through 1871, what's going to become Reconstruction on us begins to start taking place. And in the midst of this, Darwin, who is a heavy influence on the IQ of the nation, and of the world, and of the West, is now putting out another book. This book is called, right, The Descent of Man. But just like the other book, it's an incomplete title. Now, once again, this is called The Descent of Man. Descent, right? This isn't about decency. And I'm sorry, Sister Michelle, how you doing? Please forgive me. Shalom to you. Belated Shabbat Shalom to you as well, and to the family. Right, so this is about the descent of man. Descent. Okay, but that's only a part of the title. Right, that's only a part of the title. Right, that being said though, the descent of man is talking specifically, right? This is the title of it, The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. It's going to talk about other behavioral things as well. But, if you notice on National Geographic, if you notice when you're listening to old boy from Nigeria or Ghana, and I like his stuff, I watch it, but I'm just saying, on YouTube, if you're looking at animal persons used to be on Animal Planet and stuff like that. Now Animal Planet doesn't really show animals, just like MTV doesn't show music. But if you look at these different things, right? VHS doesn't show videos. But if you look at this, you'll discover, right, that what? You'll discover that these places, they focus a lot on animals and their mating habits and how they mate. Right? They focus on these mating habits and they believe this to be part of behavior. So this shows you that Charles Darwin is studying you down to the point of mating. And by the way, this shouldn't be something that's groundbreaking to us. Did they not make sure that they, when they would study you and stuff like that, and when they had you as slaves, did they not make sure that they bred you? Did we forget about that? Right? You recall that? They were breeding colonies, breeding stations, breeding cities. Especially when other countries started saying it's illegal to ship the slaves, even though they were still doing it. But they said it was illegal to ship the slaves to certain places. So then they just started making sure that they were already doing some of that, but they just started making sure outright, okay, we'll just breed them. Right? We're showing a little bit of stuff. Everything that I'm saying, you're going to be. I'm just showing the book cover, a couple of versions of the book cover that exist, right? But yeah, this is the descent of man in relation to sex. Because man, right? You guys, once again, you're thinking differently. You got to know the culture. In the culture that Charles Darwin is from, different types of men come from different types of animals. And for those that don't believe, as we already made sure we told you, once again, I'm repeating myself because I don't want this to go past anybody. I don't want anybody trying to excuse this. If somebody tries to come to you later and say, hey, I was watching the live session, he was lying about whatever. I'm repeating this stuff because I want to make sure that you see exactly what this says. It applies to his theory of evolution to humans. So this applies. This is he wrote the first book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. He wrote that in 1859. This is 1871. This is 12 years later, 11 to 12 years later, he writes this next book. It comes out and he's showing what the theory, he's going deeper into his theory. Okay? And once again, if you're part of the Patreon community, by the way, when you go to Patreon, look on there, the last post right now, at least as of right now, at this moment that I'm speaking, the last post on there are all the notes that are there. You can literally go on there, and no matter what platform you just flip through. Okay, so for those of you who are Patreon members, you can get it there. If you want these later on, you just have to try and remind me and stuff, and I'll try to see as best I can when I have time to get this to you. But I want you to recognize, right, that Charles Darwin's book, right, in 1871, The Descent of Man is widely considered to contain racist and white supremacist content. Some will argue against this, but it is widely considered, especially by today's standards. How you doing, Auntie Mary? Especially by today's standards. This second book that we're talking about today, first book, once again, by Charles Darwin, written in 1859, literally the second half of the title is called Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. This is why he's teaching evolution, to show persons that because we have evolved, now once again, even the persons who find him never followed him, because they followed him, they never found any evidence of this, and so they say, okay, now everybody came from Africa, but they still say, but those who are smarter, those who are doing better and stuff, that's just nature, the struggle for life. So even though they'll say, okay, we all come from the same place, but white persons still evolved from black persons though, and survival of the fittest out here. This is why you'll have persons, when you mention this stuff, you'll see them come on and they'll say stuff to you like, well, you guys are arguing and complaining. What, you're mad because you got conquered? Right? You ever seen that, heard that before? You ever seen that in the chat, in the comment section of these videos? Right? So this is considered by today's standards, but even back then, there were many who agree with what I'm saying, right? And this is typical of many scientific texts of this era. Right? This is what they're writing. This is typical. This is not atypical, right? This is typical of the ones who are saying that they believe that science is the way. Well, science is designed and geared towards making sure that racism, white supremacy stands on its feet, strong and proud. He said, we're not all from Africa. Some of us are Hebrews. Once again, I didn't say that. I'm with you. You ready? Not only are some of us Hebrews, and Hebrew is even too big, some of us are Israel, because not every Israelite is a Hebrew, but not every Hebrew is an Israelite, right? Or some of us Native American, and even a lot of Native Americans. We know how that works too, right? So that's not what I said. I said what I, so no, and I'm not trying to throw you shade. I just want to make sure we're clear. I'm not saying that that's what I'm saying is that scientists, many of them who are into Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, right, which is anti-black, they did their best to research and show through eugenics and all these different things with bone study and geology, etc., to try and prove his theory correct. And all they did was find things that were incorrect, so they eventually had to start saying, okay, well, the oldest bones we can find are black, right? So even in that, they only got to that thought process due to what? Due to them studying racism, white supremacy, right? So even where they have arrived at, even if they say it's better than what it used to be, it's still racism, white supremacy. It is. Why is somebody smarter than somebody else? Well, they evolved. Survival of the fittest. Those persons over there aren't either. This is how you have Matthew McConaughey married to a POC, a person of color. He goes on another POC show during 2020 with Black Lives Matter and stuff, and the person who's there, Emmanuel Ancho, a person of color, black, extremely black, if you will, Nigerian, dark skin, talking to him and trying to excuse behavior, and allows Matthew McConaughey to come on the show and say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, I've said it already. Like, how many times more do I have to say it? But you would think that Matthew McConaughey is this great guy, just like you would think that Charles Darwin is an abolitionist, because that's what they labeled him as, because he's mentions a couple of times saying it'd be nice, or it would be really great if chattel slavery goes away. But we're going to show you how one can be presumed to be on the left or the right, but there's still two parts of the same bird. So that's what I was more so talking about. And welcome, if you're joining us from India, appreciate you. Thank you for being on. If you're joining us from anywhere, but especially a person that just came on from India. All right, so when you talk about racial hierarchy, Darwin is the one who presented the racial hierarchy of human races. Once again, that word race is in quotation, not just because race, the human race, but no, race is in quotation because race and species are interchangeable. But he technically is not the person who started this. Once again, you have to know about Carl Linnaeus, who was the first person to say, well, the white man is one race coming from one animal, and the red man is one race who comes from an animal, and the yellow man is a race that comes from an animal, and the so-called black man is a race that comes from an animal. That's why I forget what they call it, the deal something, the David something, it starts with a D, that stuff that they talk about, they used to say, oh, you had to be Asian to have that. Come to find out that the Asians have like point something percent of it, and Native Americans have point something percent of it, but you're going to find more persons who are actually so-called African that have more of it, or definitely persons who are darker who have more stuff in that, right? You see what I'm saying? So these are once again theories based off of racism, white supremacy attitudes, and they're trying their best to make it work, and then they keep coming up with new theories because they realize the old theory doesn't work. If the old theory worked, or at least worked well enough to where they could find some kind of actual evidence for it, they wouldn't keep changing it. The only reason why they came out and had to start saying, okay, we'll stop teaching as much racism, white supremacy in schools is because you can't find anything to back it up. You said BLM is simply racist? Okay. So even if you think that somebody's saying that Black Lives Matter, by the way, I don't support, let's deal with that too. That's Darwinistic, right? Right, now watch this. I believe that Black Lives Matter. If you say that all lives matter, then Black Lives Matter. But I'll be the first person to tell you, many of us sniffed that out a long time ago. We weren't marching with Black Lives Matter organization. Matter of fact, if you know the Black Lives Matter stuff that's still in schools today, it teaches more about LGBTQ plus than it does about actually using its platform to talk about black persons, meaning that in essence it's blackface. You put our people out there and then you say support this so we can actually support another agenda, right? So that's not a problem here. That being said, somebody coming in and saying Black Lives Matter is racist just because they're saying Black Lives Matter, you're the same as Charles Darwin, or at least you're using his rhetoric. Now, once again, the only reason you even think there's a such thing as the human race is because you don't know that the word race and species is interchangeable. They started using that in times of, once again, Carl Linnaeus, the generation of scientists before Charles Darwin. Well, Linnaeus and them, they decided that all of us come from different species. Now, species and race were interchangeable, and they did that because animals were in competition, that's what they taught you, right? So since animals are in competition, that means that all the animals are racing. So since they're racing each other, they are races. So there's bird races, there's right? There's the ostrich, that's a bird race, right? There's a swallow, that's a bird race. There's a raven, that's a bird race. There's a cardinal, there's a bird race. There's a cassowary, that's a bird race. There's a penguin, there's a bird race. Matter of fact, there's false penguins, those are bird races, right? That's what they see. We don't know where these words come from. So even when you use the word human race, you don't even realize that that's coming from something where they're saying that all human beings aren't the same. To say that you come from a human race is to say that you come from animals and that you come from different animals. That's where that comes from. We just use what persons say. And how you doing? How you doing? So I always been Sari. Please forgive me. I'm still doing the same thing with that. But we don't. But we don't want to be honest about that. You said you've been blessed to grow up with no bigotry. Sure, you've never been affected by bigotry, right? You've never been taught about George Washington. You see what I'm saying? Like, we can't reverse curses because we don't want to revisit the lie. Reversing the curse means revisiting the lie. Somebody would say, I'm so glad that I never grew up with any bigotry. Did you learn about George Washington? Is he a bigot, to say the least? Is it bigoted to think that you can go ahead and think of somebody as so less than that you can go ahead and rip the teeth out of their mouths and make dentures for yourself? But you grew up with no bigotry. You see what I'm saying? Like, persons are so busy trying to like label this in a way where we don't have to revisit the lies. And even if you're saying what you mean to say is, I have never experienced anybody who's mistreated me, or I've never mistreated anybody because we're different. If you want to tell that, that's not true, right? Because everybody has mistreated, or everybody has at least thought of somebody different in some way. At some point, even if it was so-called innocent, there's a child out there who sees somebody in a wheelchair and at first might be a little weirded out by it. But after a while, they realize, oh, okay, they're just in a wheelchair. You see what I'm saying? We can't actually take care of the lie and break the generational curse, because nobody wants to go back and admit there's this big, huge elephant in the room, and the room is smelling and it's stinking, and the beams that support the floors are shaking because the elephant is too much. I mean, I'm supposed to have tons upon tons upon tons, not just standing in the room, but running around. At some point, the floor is going to break. But hey, I don't see it. I don't smell it. It's not. I'm not the elephant. Nobody said you are. Nobody in here. Watch this. Nobody in here who's listening to me. Can we make this? Can we say it like this? Nobody in here who's listening to me created racism. You said you know it exists, but you were not taught it. Okay, so once again, you weren't taught about George Washington. You weren't taught about Thomas Jefferson. You weren't taught about Monroe. You weren't taught about Madison. Those are supposedly, if you think of George Washington as the first president, that's the first 4 out of 5 presidents are Virginia slave owners. You don't think that they had anything to do with how persons are taught today? Matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson helps to create your educational system. Monroe helps to make sure that you have an electoral college that still exists to this day. If you vote, you use the electoral college. Matter of fact, the two black dudes who were into the buffoonery and stuff, the Hodge twins, who just brought David Duke on their show to make sure that they understood that some persons need to understand that racism is not real, or even if it is, just don't be offended by it and let everybody say the N-word and stuff like that. They brought David Duke. If you know who David Duke is, right? David Duke. So you're thinking that somebody's saying if you were taught something, you're racist. No, racism is a system. And those Hodge twins who brought David Duke on the show, I want you to see how this works. They had another person on this show. I think his YouTube channel, whatever it's called, Amazing Lucas, I think. And they had him come on the show. And he asked him a question. And I don't think persons catch this because they don't get the system is what we're talking about. Not you as an individual. Right? But no individual stronger than the society, no society stronger than the individual. If we don't fix the system, then the individual is still affected, even if they don't want to, right? If you don't like your boss, but you still show up to work, guess what? Your boss still affects you. Watch this. This is what he told him. He asked the question. It's one of the greatest ways I've ever heard somebody explain systemic anything. He says, hey, when you go to the airport, do you have to check in the TSA? Like, what does that have to do with anything? The hospital. He says, no. When you go into TSA, do you have to check, when you go to the airport and you're going to fly, do you have to deal with TSA? They say, yeah. He says, so therefore, TSA affects you. Guess what their next response was? Guess what the next response was? They go, but it doesn't mean that I can't fly. Nobody said that you can't fly, but you have to go through TSA to fly. So just because, watch this, some persons put it like this. You know, there's persons that grew up in an era, many of us, that grew up in an era where there was no such thing as TSA, there was no 9/11 yet, none of that. And we had flown before, right? I flew commercially, I flew military flights, I've flown without having to deal with TSA before it existed. Once 9/11 hit, it changed the game. And so everybody that comes after that, regardless of who forced it or did it or started it or whatever, or even if you think we need it, which by the way, I think 9/11 proved you should have a lot of security. Maybe not to the extent that they do now, but I don't mind it if it's supposedly working the way it's supposed to, right? I don't mind it, whatever. Just get there a couple hours earlier. I can chill out. I can listen to stuff. I can watch a couple games that I don't get to watch, right? All those things. Being said though, I still have to go through TSA, even if I didn't create it, even if I don't necessarily want it, or I do want it, or I love it, or I don't love it. Even if everybody who goes on the flight, even if you pay money to not have to go through the long line, you still are affected by TSA. Just because you can fly doesn't mean you're not affected by it. They didn't get it, of course, the Hodge twins. If you're bringing David Duke on your show, you don't get it. But that's what we're trying to say. And this is why we can't reverse the curse too. We can't revisit the lie, because one of the lies that we're told is that, hey, if I didn't start it, then you shouldn't say anything to me about it. But if I see a young lady, right, being brutalized on the side of the street, and yes, she might have been talking trash, right? And they beating the brakes off her, 5 dudes. Am I a man? Is it human to at least not pick up the phone, call the police, or roll your sleeves up and say, hey, something? Just because I didn't start it doesn't mean that I'll ever get the brakes beat off her, right? Now, I'll be honest, I won't go too much further than that, because that's not exactly apples to apples. I granted that. But hopefully you get what we're talking about with the airport and with the system. This is systemic. This is somebody systematically put it in place, but this is systemic. It runs whether you want it to run or not. Watch this. Anybody who has cash in their pocket, right? If you're American, or really for most of you who are listening, any of y'all, pull out some cash right now and show me the money on there that doesn't have a slave owner on it. Including Abraham Lincoln. Yes, him too. You're not affected by the system so much that when you pull your cash out, when you put that $1 bill down, that's a slave owner. When you put that $2 bill down, that's a slave owner. The $5 bill, the $10 bill, the $20 bill, the $50 bill, the $100 bill, the 1 cent, the penny, the nickel, the quarter, the dime. Oh yeah, and before you hit me with Susan B. Anthony, she didn't like us either. She said that when she was asked if she would make sure that she would fight for black men to vote, she said she would rather give up her right arm than help a black beast be able to vote. All of them, it's racism, white supremacy. So when you say I was never affected and never taught, we were taught to ignore it or to assimilate and act like it's not happening. This is the same thing we dealt with before. See, Charles Darwin, who I'm talking about now, he is so, at least some persons try to tell us, he is an abolitionist. And as has been tested and shown, even if whether you believe it's something that we should look at as a think piece or something that actually happened, if you look at the Willie Lynch letter, the letter tells you have to teach everybody to be in this system. Remember, Lyndon B. Johnson, he said, how do you get a so-called white person to follow you? He said, make sure that you tell them that you're better than the highest black man. He said, matter of fact, give them, matter of fact, let me quote it out, because I always be messing that quote up. Let me literally read what it says. Quote. No. All right. He said, if you can convince, this is what he says, to quote, right? If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. That's what he said. That's even better than what I was saying, right? This is why we should just let persons speak for themselves. So once again, he said, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. In other words, if you put this stuff together and tell him that no matter how poor he is, he's better because he's white than anybody else, right? He won't notice that the reason that he doesn't have anything is because you've taken it away. And if you really want him to go to the point where he'll fight for you, tell him not only are you better than him, but you should look down on him. This is the president of the United States. Teddy Roosevelt said that if there were 10 Native Americans in front of you, lined up in front of him, he said if 9 of them got off and he turned his back and he heard pew pew and the other one fell down, he said it wouldn't bother him. Abraham Lincoln could have won the Civil War faster, but he was busy fighting against Native Americans and committing genocide all the way from sea to shining sea. George Washington could have won sooner if he had allowed slaves to be free, or at least allowed them to fight and allowed black persons to fight. Instead, he said, but if they fight, they might think that they're actually going to be free. They were like, well, yeah, we might want to think about that because we're trying to stay alive and have a country. He said, no, make sure that they stay slaves. When he's on that ship with his knee up, right, with the Moor right next to him that nobody talks about, but with his knee up, and they're going from one place to the other, and he's got his hand behind his back and all that, when they're headed that way, guess what they're headed to do? They're not headed just to go ahead and fight the fight like you were taught. They're also headed to off a whole bunch of Native Americans and commit genocide. These are the presidents that set precedents, and yet we have it in our mind that the system has been something we were never affected by. If it's not disingenuous, it's something that we're not thinking about it properly. And how you doing, these herbs? Now, once again, this is not to come down on anybody because nobody in here created this system. That being said, we're not going to act like nobody's been affected by it to the point to where there are persons that still walk around with PTSS. That nobody talks about the psychological evaluation that needs to happen. I'm not trying to tell you that because we're talking about this, you did something. I'm trying to tell you that you might be living in something based off of something that somebody else did, and maybe we should look at whether what they did is something that we should separate from. I'm not even trying to necessarily put a stop to it. The Most High will do that in His time, but it's going to get worse in the system that's designed on that. It's supposed to. The Bible tells us the world is supposed to get worse. We're supposed to get better and be ready to separate from it. What are we going to do? We're going to keep trying to figure out ways to support it. We're trying to say, well, it's not my thing. We're trying to say, hey, I'll survive it as much as possible. No, it's wicked. It's evil. It is. As we talked about yesterday, pharmakia, right? Revelation chapter 18, verses 23 and 24. When it gets to that word sorceries there, it's talking about pharmacy, pharmakia, the spirit of witchcraft or being a witch. And it talks about those who make money, the merchants who make money off of it, whatever. And they did that and used that also to attack priests and prophets and things like that. Those persons have eradicated all persons so that they can go ahead and give you fake versions of food and fake versions of medicine and offer you, right? But they're the merchants. They're the ones who make money, and you're supposed to look up to them. No, they are wicked, right? Yeah, and they're of Babylon, right? The whore of Babylon, even. If you read it in its entirety, Revelation 18. But Revelation 18:23, when it has that word sorceries, has the word pharmacy, pharmakia. Look up what pharmakia means. It means those persons who are administering those prescriptions to you. Or those things that have been prescribed. That's what it means. Right? We're having this weird conversation. And so, guess what? By that standard, I see, once again, we talked about gynecology, person like this and that. Gynecology only exists the way that it does because of what they were doing to women who were enslaved. We can keep trying to beat around the bush on it, but we have to come back. If we're going to reverse the curse, we have to at least admit that there's a lie, and we got to revisit this thing. We're not doing revisionist history, by the way. Because see, revisionist history means if I revisit it, I'm going to try to change what happened. No. I'm talking about we're going to revisit it. We're not going to do revisionist history. It's his story. I want to tell you his story. And he's telling you what he said, not me. It's very important that we catch that, right? That we comprehend what's going on with these things. We're missing a lot of this stuff, and we fight on some of this stuff because we're not doing it. So Charles Darwin's book we're talking about now from 1871, Once again, it's actually called The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. What is he talking about in this book? Also, he's talking about sexual selection. Now, this is, when you guys have heard me talk about there's 6 types of evolution. One type of evolution is supposed to be this animal came from this animal over time through intelligent design, stuff like that, right? But also sexual selection, right, which is one to where some person just say, hey, you know what, these animals evolved because one animal had sex with another animal and they had offspring that looks like a mix between the two. It looks very similar to their parents, which to me just sounds like animals, mating, but it is what it is, right? They try to say this, so this is where a lot of this comes from, right? And why they study this, and why they study you, and why they studied you when they bred you, right? So look at this. So look at this. Sexual selection. He used his theory of sexual selection to explain racial divergence, suggesting that different populations evolved distinct physical and cultural traits, which he then ranked according to his Victorian era biases. In the Victorian era, right? The Victorian era, sex was something that was crazy to even talk about because Victoria and those in the Victorian era were supposed to do all this really wild, disgusting, decrepit stuff in the bed. That's where you get this whole, we want a lady in the street with a freak in the bed. You thought that was lewd. But that's Darwin. Right? Oh no, that's not even Darwin. That's Victoria. Well, go on, Audrey, how you doing? Right? It's Darwinistic, right? It's Victorian, rather, excuse me, with that part, right? And he used this theory. Now, why are they talking about this? They're talking about this as far as what? As far as his the sexual selection, because hey, so when these different races, when these different species have sex with each other, this is what they're attracted to. So guess what? In the Victorian era, a white man could never be attracted to a black woman, even if they're R-wording them, some of them. But you could never see that because a great white man is from a different animal. And this type of animal is more refined and has, once again, according to his first book, should be preserved because their race is favored. Right? A monkey should be attracted to a monkey. Right? And even though they've disproven this over and over again, but black persons, they come from monkeys. Right? Matter of fact, if you be honest, now they've changed the theory. Remember before they used to tell you came from gorillas, then they said you came from chimpanzees, and now they try to say you come from bonobos. This is why I say stop worrying about these theories. These theories change because these theories were never correct in the first place. They are theories. They are not true. They are not true, right? The theory, matter of fact, those of you who think that you have something called a neutron, you think that there are protons, electrons, and neutrons. A neutron is a theory. We talked about this before, but it's been a little while since I brought this up. Let me bring this up again. If you're not aware of what I'm saying, literally, a neutron is a theory. You know that, right? Nobody's ever seen a neutron. A neutrino is a theory because nobody's ever seen a neutron, right, or a neutrino. If you don't know what I mean, see, this is why, once again, we've been taught stuff and we let it fester and we say, oh, this doesn't affect us. But some of y'all will say, and not the person who said it earlier, once again, if the shoe fits weird, if it doesn't, take it off. There are persons that don't even know that when you're dealing with protons, right, electrons, that's how you got these huge explosions and bombs that kept getting more and more and more dastardly, right, and intimidating in what they could do. Right, they would take a proton and they'd take protons and electrons, they would separate them, they would isolate them, and they would blow them up. And the pressure of doing that to something that small, or a bunch of them that are that small, causes an explosion. But what they used to teach, once again, this is supposed to be science. This is where the religion of science, or you gotta see that they have faith in stuff that can't even be produced. You said, bro, in Africa, so bro, in Africa, they has their own religions before Europeans invaded and forced you to adopt their faith. It's a lie. Okay, well, once again, the persons that you say forced us to, if you believe in excavations, if you believe in archaeology, the so-called Bible before it was warped and changed existed before then, which is why you should focus on that one instead of what you're talking about, number one. And number two, I'm well aware. I'm not talking about somebody else. And if you haven't missed it, I'm actually not even talking about the religious aspect of that. I'm talking about the lies dealing with Darwin that persons have been taught. Yeah. If you're going to troll, if you're going to automatically say stuff or use ad hominem, which doesn't show any apologetic soundness, at least have your mindset together where you're ready. You're not even in a position to have an argument, a proper debate, because you can't even listen long enough to see what somebody say. Or since you're on this platform, you can literally take your finger on your device or your mouse, hit the dot on the timeline, and just scoot it back and rewind and listen long enough before you make asinine statements. Just science will always come up with the same answers. Cool, no problem. So once again, so Darwin came up with the answer, right? Real quick, review. Since this person doesn't listen, review for you guys though. Real quick, you ready? You guys tell me in the chat. What is the name of Charles Darwin's book written in 1859 again? Because that's the problem that science, some persons like you keep coming up with the same result. What is the title of Charles Darwin's book again? Written in 1859? If you're able to put it in the chat. Are you able to put it in the chat? And I'll say something to you that you don't do, because human beings actually treat each other different than what you're doing. Is it Dougal McGuire, whatever your name is? Hopefully I'm pronouncing it Dougal McGuire, Dougal, excuse me. Right? What's the name of Charles Darwin's book written in 1859? The Origin of Species. That's not the entire title. At least you know what I'm talking about. But what is the title of the book? Because science consists of the same result, which means that you should know, right, what the scientist said, even though Charles Darwin himself was not a scientist, nor did he get his degree in science. He's speaking about his faith. But once again, what is the name of his book? No, it's not The Origin of Species. See? You see what I'm saying? Here's somebody who's given a hat. It's like when somebody says, for example, you don't believe in the Bible, whatever, cool. The Bible, people say there's something called a golden rule. The golden rule supposedly is do unto others as you want done unto you. That's not true. The golden rule is do unto others as you want done unto you, for this is the law and the prophets. If you don't know the law and the prophets, you don't know what to do to others or expect to others, at least within the context of that saying. But because persons don't care enough to actually learn the culture of it or learn it in its completeness or within its context, they don't care. So once again, what is the title of Charles Darwin's book written in 1859? No. See, don't change it. Don't change it. You said science. This is what you said. See, this is why you have to be careful about statements that you know, because once again, supposedly, like you're saying, there can be mistakes. So so if you're saying that science will always come to the same conclusion, right? You're saying there's no wiggle room. So now there's wiggle room. So now what I'm saying is correct, which is somebody could be giving you something that's not true while labeling it as scientific. Matter of fact, if you're going to talk about actual scientific notation or even experimentation, you shouldn't reverse the process and start with the conclusion first. You should start with the hypothesis and work towards the conclusion, which is ultimately what I'm talking about. But once again, you for those, so thank you for those who actually could do, you know, you can talk all this stuff but can't do something simple, right? Thank you so much for those who actually did that. Watch this. It's right in the chat for you. You can see it right there. Yeah, I don't care about all that because you're being disingenuous. So watch this. You ready? It's called it's called The Origin of Species by means of natural selection, or maybe even put semicolon, if you know what that is, right? So it's called The Origin of Species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Charles Darwin's book in 1859 is getting you to the same conclusion, which is, hey, look at somebody who looks like me, who's talking like me, who believes what I believe, who has a different culture. If he's not somebody who's up on the top, he is not evolved enough or is not thinking about things properly in its right evolutionary place, and he needs to be put in his place. That drives this conversation in your trolling, which basically, even if you think that you're having a genuine conversation, is trolling because you don't know that what you speak. I'm not trying to be mean on this. You're not ready for this conversation. And then what we're focusing on is 12 years later, he wrote another book written in 1871, right? That's what we're actually focused on today. Once again, that book that he wrote is called The Descent of Man, and it's focusing on what? It's the descent of man, and it applies to the descent of man in selection in relation to sex. And he's talking about race relations and how different races of persons are there. And all these different scientific things are based upon this stuff and really don't even begin to actually start changing for real, as far as being scientific until the 60s and 70s. And persons are still using a lot of the same stuff that's there today to be able to, right? But all we have to do to make ourselves feel better about it and tell persons that they're being snowflakes or that they don't know what they're talking about is just simply turn around and say it's scientific, which is a lie. Or if it's scientific according to a culture that wants persons to be locked down based upon the color of their skin. And by the way, people try to call Charles Darwin an abolitionist. With Charles Darwin, obviously already we're seeing there's got to be something to that. Or, as what happens a lot of times, you can be an abolitionist but not think that a black person is on your level. John Brown dealt with that a lot. John Brown, who died in the fight based off of the Bible to say that black persons deserve to be treated the same as white persons, right? Fought for it, his family bled for it, things of that nature. He said that he was irritated with the Underground Railroad, where persons would help black persons to get free, but then wouldn't want to call them Mr. or Mrs., wouldn't want to treat them well, would not want to feed them, just said, hey, we don't like seeing slavery, so we'll make sure you guys get free, but after that, we really don't like the fact that you're here. There were a lot of abolitionists that felt like that and still mistreated them. So, hey, they mistreated them with a smile rather than mistreating them with the ground, but to mistreat anybody based on the color of their skin is still wrong. So even though some people want to try to say Charles Darwin was an abolitionist, even though he never said it, it doesn't mean that he's not dealing with racism. And just as like today, somebody says, because I'm a Democrat, I'm better than a Republican. If you're part of the same system, it's the same system. So once again, thank you to everybody for being on all the different platforms. Today we're talking about, we're in the midst of a series called Reversing the Curse Means Revisiting the Lie. And today specifically, we're talking about Darwin and friends. Right? And person's gonna try and change this and manipulate this and say we gotta change this into this and that, et cetera, et cetera. No. Right? Like, we're going to stand on this and we're going to tell the truth about Charles Darwin today, even if you don't like it or not. And guess what? That means that many of you are going to have to look at your stances that you take with this stuff, and you might have to look at this stuff differently. Matter of fact, watch this. The abolitionist stance versus racism. While Darwin was a staunch abolitionist, that's what they say, right, who detested the cruelty of slavery, this did not equate to a belief in racial equality. Just like there are persons now that say, oh yeah, I'm this and that. You can be a Democrat and still not like black persons. You can be a Republican and still not like black persons. Heck, you can be black and still not like yourself. So-called black. You're the leader of all Hamites? Okay, I don't know what it has to do with anything, but all right. Right? Not what I'm talking about right now. Right? This is not, right? So scholars note that being against the institution of slavery, scholars, by the way, so this for real means white men that you would respect what they say, right? Scholars note that being against the institution of slavery is not the same as being anti-racist. And his private letters and published works still reflected a belief in white superiority and the eventual extinction of savage populations due to the struggle for existence. Now remember, what's his first book that we went into called? It's called Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Do you not hear the same language? Right? He could believe, right? He could believe that that chattel slavery shouldn't be a thing, while still believing in white superiority and the eventual extinction of savage, the same word that they use in the Declaration of Independence, the same words that they're using to describe those persons in the Constitution, right? The savage, right? Sauvage in français, savage is a word. Savage, you're speaking French, you don't know it, but that word savage is French, and savage means wild. You guys recall not that long ago, there was somebody that came up with that perfume or that cologne or whatever it's called, and the cologne was called Savage. Right? Around the same time. See, we're not talking about a long time ago. Remember, around the same time, you had persons coming up with shirts with monkeys on them, talking about that you were the coolest monkey in the jungle or whatever that was. You guys recall that? Like, this is not stuff that we have to go back hundreds of years ago to find. This is stuff that happened in the 2020s. While we're trying our best to act like oh no, this is, and he's making this up, and he's just that, and he's just too no, and he's and now somehow, and see, this is also gaslighting, because you're doing this thing because he's a pastor and he's mentioned the Bible, and therefore why are you talking about faith? I'm literally giving you what Charles Darwin said. Right? You don't have to challenge the Bible right now. You have to challenge what Charles Darwin said. Y'all catch that? Right? You can tell when somebody's losing when you can't even argue with the arguments about it. It's like when we were talking about defending our women and you guys started trying to tell me why I didn't know the Bible. Should you defend women or not? That was the question. You show who you are when you have to try and use something I'm not even talking about. That's why we can't reverse these curses, because you won't revisit the lie, because you hurt when you realize that somebody's saying, hey, you might be the problem. And rather than just being a man or a woman or a human being, or whatever, just saying, yo, I'll go ahead and do what I need to do to help and to make sure that I reverse the curse. You'd rather live in the curse because you want to win an argument. It shows who you really are. After today, if you didn't know some of this stuff already, after today, there's no way you can defend Charles Darwin. But once again, Charles Darwin is not even a scientist. For those of you who keep talking to me, talking about religion and all this stuff and saying, well, because of your Bible, you know, it's science. Science will always get us to the same place. He's not using science. He's not a scientist. Stop it. Like, if you don't know that about Charles Darwin, then no offense to you, no shade, you might want to keep your mouth closed during this conversation. Respectfully. You might want to keep your mouth closed during this conversation. Because if you're not aware that you're talking about science and how science gets to the same place, and yet Charles Darwin is not even a scientist, then you're not ready for this conversation. How you doing, Sister Sheena? You're just not. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm trying to be respectful. I really am, because if I really want to tell you about yourself, there's some other stuff that would really show yourself that I respect you guys more than you respect yourselves. I respect you guys more than you respect me, most assuredly. And I'm trying my best to help you out, because you're unaware that you're way off on this stuff. Okay? Matter of fact, influence on scientific racism. What does that say? There's an influence that Charles Darwin and his studies have on scientific racism. You've never even heard such a term, have you? There's an influence on scientific racism through this book, written in 1871. Although racism predated Darwin, which means it came before him, the publication of The Descent of Man, right, provided a new scientific justification and lexicon for existing racist assumptions, which were quickly adopted by others to promote ideas like eugenics, which his cousin, which we'll be talking about a little later, his cousin is the one who wrote that. His cousin / brother-in-law is the one who wrote on that. Right? You're trying to defend somebody saying they're coming from a scientific place and they don't. He has an influence on scientific racism. See, before him, there was a little bit of this stuff, but they hadn't quite figured out how to do this. But once Charles Darwin comes on the scene, he's able to give them scientific jargon. He's able to give them a new etymology. He's able to give them a new way of thinking, or a new way of pronouncing or announcing or regurgitating the same verbiage to allow racism to exist. You don't have to say, I hate black people because they're black. You can say, I hate black people because of their skeletal structure, right? You don't have to say black people belong in cages because they're animals. You can have somebody like Abraham Lincoln say black people can be locked up because they commit crimes, to where now persons can say 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime. He gave you he allowed you to say it was scientific to be racist. Before, you could be racist, but it was hard to be scientific in your racism. Now, the best schools teach racism. Did you catch that? Right? He has an influence on scientific racism, if you want to use that term, right? He has an influence on racism because now we can be scientific. Now, when I'm racist, I'm intelligent. See, and that's what you sound like when you come up with that rhetoric, respectfully, or take it disrespectfully. I'm gonna be honest. It don't really matter if it's truth in this regard. All right, I don't want to be disrespectful to you from jump, but I'm trying to teach you something. You think that you sound smart because you sound racist. Nowadays, what they've done is they've said, well, we'll hide that Darwin and persons who were influenced by Darwin are racist, and that science was influenced by him, and that racism was influenced by him, and that colonies were influenced by him, and that England was influenced by him, and that the United States of America and Canada and Mexico and Brazil and Japan, and yeah, even Japan used racism. You are right, scientific racism. Japanese said it made it easier for them to realize that they could go ahead and be worse to Korea, and worse to China, and worse to Taiwan, and worse to all these places, the Philippines, etc. They said they realized that they could be worse to these places. Why? Because they read books that showed that there was evolution and that they deserved to be able to do these things to others, because maybe the Japanese came from better animals than the other ones. Right? Racism. See, it's not just, you're thinking, I'm talking about a system. You're so busy trying to defend whiteness that you're not realizing that the system of racism is something that is demonic and evil. Or by the way, the saying goes, the greatest trick of the devil is to make one thing that he never existed. So since there is no spiritual side of things, you keep doing devilish things and trying to dress it up in science, because the more scientific terms you use, the smarter you sound, at least in your mind. But those of us who know the game, you don't sound smart to us, because we know Charles Darwin wasn't even a scientist. If you're going to argue science, shouldn't you at least argue as a scientist? An IST on the word means that you are proficient in it. He's not even proficient enough in science to get a degree in it. Salah. Here you are being inefficient in your argument, because you don't recognize that the one that you're arguing for is inefficient in his science. He's not even a scientist, because to be a scientist, you should be prolific at it. Literally, Charles Darwin went somewhere, couldn't afford to go where he was going, got on somebody else's ship, went to the Galapagos Islands, looked there and said, hey, there's a bird that has a beak like this, and another bird has a beak like this, and another bird has a beak like this, and another bird has a beak like this. You know what? They must have evolved from each other. That's wrote a book about it and said, hey, I saw that and it let me know, well, hey, just because we're similar, if they got a color like this, and they got a color like this, and they got a color like this, and they got a color like this, they must have evolved from different animals, not even from each other. These are things that he printed and wrote out and spread out throughout the whole world. And persons who supposedly have higher IQ believe these things. This is why there are persons out there that believe Nick Fuentes is intelligent, because he calls you an N-word 25 times during a live session. This is why some persons love Kanye when Kanye wears a Spanish Inquisition outfit that you confuse for the KKK one. Basically being racist towards the same people. But, he actually wore the Spanish Inquisition one, not the KKK one. It's still saying he doesn't like his own people himself. This is why Candace Owens, if she says white lives matter, right, and says that I'm here to fight for Charlie Kirk, she has to be intelligent, because Charlie Kirk didn't like black people. This is why you guys say Charlie Kirk is more important to the country than Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Because racism is equated in this wicked system to being intelligent. Once again, just to read it for you, this is not Kofi speaking. This stuff you can look up for yourself, right? Influence on scientific racism. We're talking about Charles Darwin, whose first book we've been talking about over and over again in 1859 is called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. Preservation means that we got to preserve our race, right? That's the first book. Second book that he writes is a book called what? It's called The Descent of Man. And all the races that predated Darwin, the publication of The Descent of Man provided a new scientific justification and lexicon for existing racist assumptions, which were quickly, not things that were proven, by the way. It says for racist assumptions. You know how Monsieur Candy, right? Mr. Candy in Django Unchained, who couldn't even speak French but wanted to be called that or whatever because he just wanted to look smart. And one of the things that he used to show how much smarter he was than everybody else was to show the 3 dots on the back of that skull. That's what they did. They said, you see, a Negro, this Negro over here, he's got 3 dots on the back of his skull. And that means that he is never going to be anything but a Negro, but an N-word. That's what he said. That's what he lived by. And if you recall during the movie, they're showing you evolution is racist because Candy believes that there will be an exceptional Negro. There'll be 1 in a billion chance that there'll be one black Negro, one black slave that's actually exceptional. And then he runs into Django's character, and Django is supposed to be that exceptional Negro. He even says it in the movie. He says, Django, that blah, blah, exceptional Negro. I believe you might be that exceptional Negro. That's what he tells him. That they're telling you in the movie that evolution is racist. Now watch this. Modern reception. This is what the problem is with a lot of persons. Today, the scientific community unequivocally rejects the idea of race as a valid biological description of human variation. Right? I'm just read it. Recognizing that all humans belong to a single species. While acknowledging Darwin's foundational contributions to evolutionary theory, modern scholars and institutions actively push against his unfounded and harmful assertions regarding race and sex. His work is often cited as an example of how prevailing cultural prejudices can seep into and warp scientific inquiry. The problem with this is that you're still using his stuff. The only reason why, once again, they say that so-called black women don't feel pain is because you have persons like Charles Darwin that made it sound intelligent to be racist. Any racist assumption that was out there, they could tell you, hey, Charles Darwin has this book about preserving our race in the struggle for life. Hey, Charles Darwin has this book, The Descent of Man, where he talks about sex and what people are attracted to and what they think and how they do and how we're from different places and how over time, black persons aren't going to be here anyways, so we might as well treat them however, because at the end of the day, they're not on the same evolutionary level evolved from the same animals. That's what they teach. Hey, how you doing, babe? I'm sorry, my wife is on the honorable minds. Always check her out on TikTok, YouTube, website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. How you doing, Betty Boop? How you doing? Let's see, the God Perspective. I missed something, Ali. Please forgive me, I missed you. Map Production. Okay, so you see this, and once again, these notes that we're going over today. If you're part of the Patreon family, you already got access to all this stuff. You can go through these notes and read this stuff yourself. Right? I'm doing the reading for you now. If you want to go there and read at the same time, feel free to go there and read at the same time. Right? But this is some of the stuff that we offer in Patreon, things like that you guys are able to even see before we do on the live session. Now, I like to go to an article. Once again, this is not before somebody's arguing the Bible and all this other stuff, whatever. You don't even have to argue that right now. You got to argue Darwin. You got to argue Darwin and all these other persons that have come, because today talks about Darwin and friends. So let's talk about some this thing written, and this is written May 29th, 2003. It's on a platform called Wall Builders, WALLBUILDERS. It's talking about Darwin and races from 2023. Okay, we're just gonna read some. We've already gone through a lot of this already. Okay, when Charles Darwin released his famous book, The Origin of Species, in 1859, a jolt shook, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know if we need to read on that. But, a jolt shook shook the scientific world with seemingly innumerable consequences. One such result was the notable increase of radical propositions justifying racism veiled in the language of science. Right? What we just talked about. Okay? Darwin hints at his own racist views within the subtitle of the I can't even read. I guess it says prolific. I got stuff or monolithic. Sorry, monolithic book, right? Which says in full. Here's the title in full once again, because you guys only know the part that they want you to know. But the full title of his book is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Interestingly, modern editions, like the one published by the American Museum of Natural History, dispense with the majority of Darwin's title, preferring instead to cut everything beyond On the Origin of Species. So once again, this is what? American Museum of Natural History. So if you were to go to Washington, D.C., if you were to go to New York City, etc., and you were to go, right, if you were to go Washington, D.C. territory, New York City, if you were to go to Chicago, Illinois, if you were to go to anywhere where they have such museums or anything similar to it, and you were to try and look at anything they're already so-called whitewashing everything. They're already saying, we're not going to tell you the title in full. That should speak to us. That should say something to us, right? Like, they're already making the point to let you know we are not going to tell the truth about what this man actually was about. We're still going to put his stuff up here and say that he's important in history, but we're not going to tell you how he affected others' story. His story can be up here as far as him looking great, but the story of others, we won't put that up there. Should we not say something's afoot, the game's afoot? Right? Should we not at that point be like, something's odd about that, right? Like, hey, this man clearly is talking about the white race being preserved, and they don't even tell you that in the museum. Clearly, this man is talking about the white race being preserved, but they won't tell you that in school. That's why the half-truth is always a whole lie, and a lie don't tell who tell it. Or a lie don't care who tell it, excuse me. Right? Clearly, this man, half of what he said, the more important half of what he said, if we be honest, is not going to be mentioned, because if we mention it, then we have to admit to you, yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff in here that we probably lying to you as well, right? Like, so for example, I like to go to museums a lot. I really do. I learn a lot of museums, and I like to go to them over and over and over again, because you start finding more stuff that's interesting, whether it be truth or lie. You'll find a lot of interesting stuff. And so, I've loved that since I was a little child. And when I go to I think it's the Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. I believe it's the one with the big golden dome on top of it and all that. When you go in there, it's got like the place where you see like the big mammoth when you first come in. It's got all the whole thing where it's got like water, the squid and stuff like that. I don't know if that's not the colossal squid, the other huge squid and stuff like that they have in there, and they have the place where you can see the planet and stuff and all that stuff. And it's like that one, if you've ever been. And when you go there, they got a whole section that's designed to teach you about Neanderthals. Problem is that they keep saying that Neanderthals this and that, but I see as somebody who likes to study and research, I know what they used to say Neanderthals were. They used to say we were Neanderthals until they discovered something called DNA, which, by the way, to be honest, to be fair, they don't really know what they're doing with DNA. They're just getting closer to stuff, and they find out more and more how little they actually know. That being said, according to their science, they found out that so-called black persons really don't have any Neanderthal DNA. Some have 0%. But you know who has a bunch of, well, not a bunch, according to them, a lot more than what you would think, where they said it's only, 2%. Some would argue that it's more or less, whatever. That's for those circles that have that part. But at least about 2% is usually a safe kind of agreement that persons have. So-called white persons have it. And then when they did that, then they did research for the first time to actually find out what was there. See, they were so racist that all they would say is, oh yeah, black persons are Neanderthals, black persons lived in caves, black persons had no knowledge, they had no language, And even when they had to start admitting maybe so-called black persons came first, okay, well, you know what, they might have came first, but they still dumb, stupid, we evolved from them. Then come to find out, wait a minute, if they have 0% DNA, then that means that so-called white persons, then they researched, they were like, oh yeah, you know how we said these Neanderthals had these big, huge foreheads and stuff? That's not true. Oh, you know how we said Neanderthals didn't have language? That's not true. They had to come out and start saying, but when you still go to the Natural History Museum today, to this day, as the boxer would say, right? When you go there till to this day, you'll see a whole huge exhibit where they still keep talking about Neanderthals, is that they actually existed the way that they told you during racism and white supremacy. How you doing, Brother Kofi? It's still right there, right in front of your face. Every time you go to the Natural History Museum, you will see, if you go to that session, it's still there. They're still espousing the same untruths, talking about how many tens of thousands of years ago they lived and died. They have to, but even though they've had to come out, but they're not going to say it. It's the same thing with Charles Darwin. If you go to a museum, or you go to a library, you go to your school, if you go to your biology class, your chemistry class, etc., guess what? They're going to tell you about Charles Darwin, but they're not going to tell you that second half of the book, let alone the second book that we're focusing on today, written in 1871, in which he's telling you about how black persons will die off and it's okay, because the first book said, hey, we're going to preserve our race anyways. See, today you come to the wrong place. If you're going to say, I'm going to attack you because of blah, blah, whatever, you don't even have to believe what I believe today. I'm talking about Darwin and what he wrote and what's right there before you and what you can look up for yourself. Why won't you just simply turn the page? Why won't you simply type it in? You know, you could type it in, you could turn the page. You know, you could ask other persons. You can go to so-called white persons if it's better to go to them and get it. You will not do that. Not that you cannot do it, you will not. You won't. You will not. You won't not do it. It's right there in front of you. But see, you mad because I got the receipts. I got the receipts for you today. Okay? Interestingly, modern editions like the one published by the American Museum of Natural History, this means not only do they show it to you, it means they publish and they sell it, but they sell it half truth. All right, so they will dispense it with half of missing. Readers of Darwin, watch this. Readers of who? Not readers of Kofi, not readers of the Bible, right? Not readers of creationists. Readers of Darwin, right? Excuse me. Readers of Darwin will note, however, that the scientist was an ardent abolitionist. That's what they'll tell you once again, because they say he's quoted as saying a couple times that if England got rid of slavery, then that would be notable, and therefore that means that he liked black folk. But let's read. Readers of Darwin will note, however, that the scientist was an ardent abolitionist. In his young days, he followed closely the efforts of Wilberforce and the anti-slavery forces, writing in 1833. So this is before 1859, when he was a young man. You know, it's always weird that on the opposite, they always tell us that people can change, but for some reason, we can't even say, well, let's say he was genuinely believing that black persons are decent human beings. We're acting like he can't change his mind over time, right? Just like it's really weird because if somebody says, for example, Jerry Jones, those of you who are into football, Dallas Cowboys, you guys recall that Jerry Jones recently, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, somewhere recently, got caught up to where they saw pictures of him with the little girl and the little boy that were trying to go to school, and he was out there with the mob trying to make sure that they couldn't get in, right? And then everybody started coming out. See, instead of dealing with the actual issue and stuff, we didn't even look for an apology, anything like that. You know why? Because who can't? Because and of course they got Stephen A. Smith and others, and the Dallas Cowboys. You know, these gladiators and these persons who shuck and jive and stuff. They came out. Well, Jerry never racist, and Jerry gave a whole bunch of black persons money. If it wasn't for Jerry Jones, a lot of black people would be poor. And because of Jerry Jones, a lot of black people still are poor. And because of Jerry Jones, there were persons that weren't allowed in school, right? Or the National Guard. The same way y'all talk about Trump has to bring the National Guard for this city and that city and that city. The National Guard had to be brought for children that go to school. The school that you say is so inclusive that you have to bring out the National Guard. Now, you guys recognize today, you'll say that too many black people live in D.C., seek the National Guard, and too many black and Latinos live in New York City. Let's see if we can get them there. Hey, black people in Chicago, let's get them over there. Hey, black people in LA, let's get them over there. Black people in Oakland, let's get them over there. You know, black Cubano people who are in Mexico or who are in Florida, let's get them down there in Miami. All this stuff y'all talking about, but you don't get that the National Guard had to be sicked on you because little black children couldn't go to school. You know, they talk bad about Sister, now our ancestor, I hope I'm saying her name right, I believe I am, Sister Angela Davis. They talk bad about her and stuff. Somebody tried to ask her one time, they said, you talk about, and this same thing they say to us to this day, right? This is Darwinism at its finest. They'll say stuff to us like, well, you know, you talk about this or whatever. When have you ever experienced violence? When have you ever experienced racism, right? They say that to us quite a bit, right? So they said that to her when she was a younger woman. And her response is one of the best responses I've ever heard because she just talked from personal experience. She said, what do you mean this and that? She was like, you guys are the ones, in my experience, that hate us. She said, you remember when the little girls got bombed in that church? And I didn't know this until I had listened to her say this. She said, I didn't go to that church. She said, but I lived in that area. And she said, we saw the explosion. And she said she saw arms and pieces of bodies. And while you're telling me how you ever experienced it, she's like, not only have I experienced it, I've seen it, and black person experience way more than what you think. She said on top of that, in the same state, nobody talks about it, in that same year, there was something like 30 to 40 bombings of churches. Maybe not in that same year, let's say, to be nice, let's say a decade. I feel like it was pretty close to the same year. But let's just say in a decade, there were bombings, because that's still way too much. One is way too much, right? But she says there were 30 to 40 bombings. I had to look it up. I was like, wait a minute, dang. How did that escape my radar? How have I never heard that before? That it wasn't just one bombing with little girls. There was like 30 to 40 of them. And it's interesting that persons noted that's bad. You know why you know it's bad? Because the Christian nationalist here is trying to use that to go ahead and go over to, not Egypt, where is it over here? In Africa right now, because supposedly, we don't even know if they did, but maybe they did, right? And let's just say, for the sake of argument, they did. Muslims, even though the Christians and Muslims fight each other over there, but the Muslims bombed the church. And guess what the Christian nationalists over here want to do, and Trump is talking about possibly doing? Let's go over there and shut down the whole country, and let's put the military over there because Christians must be protected. Meanwhile, over here in your same country, Angela Davis, who just passed away, you guys say, what do you know about violence? When she literally saw pieces of children because of a bombing. And you say that racism, white supremacy doesn't exist. It's only in your mind. Stop talking about it. 2020, 2021, Mexicans and blacks had to be rescued by police officers from a plantation where chattel slavery was going on. 2025, a month ago, 2 so-called white persons arrested who were trying to get homeless white persons to go with them, get on a plane, go to an island in Haiti and enslave and have chattel slavery done and take over and impregnate the slaves that they were going to have, who were going to be underage Haitian girls. 1960, 1970, we have it documented, we have the person's testimony, it's on Netflix even. If you want to just turn on Netflix, if you don't want to read a book. We have persons who literally said they did not know that chattel slavery had ended. Nobody had ever told them. It wasn't just they were working as sharecroppers. Nobody had told them that chattel slavery was over. They had watched their uncles and their mothers and everybody get hung and get forced, sexually into things that they didn't want to do, all this stuff. And yet, persons are still over here talking about, what do you know about racism? What do you know about this? Why do we talk about racism so much? Because it's one of the most wicked, decrepit things ever, and sin is sin. And we have been called, have we not been called to fight sin? Like, did I miss the memo on that? Did somebody have a different Bible than me? If somebody's sinning, right? As much as y'all talk about the Bible talks about slavery, which it doesn't, or it does, but it talks about actually being against it. Have you not read the laws against slavery and how if you have indentured contracts, they're only supposed to go 3 years, 7 years, and if somebody somehow tries to play crazy and get some paperwork together every 50th year, all debt must go away because those in debt are slaves and those that are slaves are in debt. When it says, forgive us of our debts as we forgive our debtors, as much as you don't know this because you don't know the culture, it's saying forgive us of anything that enslaves us, right? So that you would help us to make sure that we're not enslaved to the sin that we've had. That's what that means. Because anybody in debt is a slave. And anybody who's a slave is in debt. And if you're in debt to somebody, just because you are the color of your skin, and somebody uses science to back that up, that's sin, and we should speak against it. And if you don't like calling it sin, fine. The word sin, chesed, means we should repent or turn from it because it misses the mark. Or because it misses the mark, we should repent and turn away from it. Why is that problematic? Why is that problematic for some of you? Right? The only reason why we have to talk about it is because we expect it. By the way, why do we have to talk about it? Even to the point to where some of us are on the opposite end, where we have to also learn forgiveness so that we don't put persons in debt and not forgiving them to where they're enslaved to us. That's why we don't want white guilt. I don't want you to feel guilty because you're white. I want you to be righteous as a human being. Okay? If you have a grandfather who was a murderer, I don't want you to feel guilty because he was a murderer. I want you to get over that and get past that. I want you to make sure, though, that you don't start murdering and saying, hey, because my grandfather did it, it was okay. Right? If you had a bad marriage and it makes you think that all men are trash or all women are trash, I want to deal with the fact that all men and women are trash just because you had a bad relationship. Just because we mention this stuff doesn't mean that it's your fault. If anything, now that you know about it, the fault becomes yours if you won't help. if you really say you're the human being that you say you are, if you really are the believer that you say you are, right? If you really follow the law the way that you say you do, if you really love persons the way that you say you love them, then where's the renewing of your mind that cause transformation? There is no transformative properties happening because you have not stopped being property by being conformed to a slave mindset. Right? Isn't that Romans chapter 12? I beseech you. He said, I beg you, therefore, brethren. I beg you because y'all wants to stir this up and have us come together and have us get out of this stuff and get back to the law and make sure that we're grafted and make sure that we actually become a nation and make sure that holiness is here and make sure that we fight evil. He said, I beseech you, therefore, because of all that, brethren, by the mercies of the Most High, that you present yourselves a living sacrifice. Sacrifice means it's not going to feel great all the time, but while you live for something outside of yourself. Become a living sacrifice, which means you got to be holy, you must be acceptable, and this service of mankind should be reasonable. It's your reasonable service. And this only happens when you come out of being conformed to this wicked, decrepit mindset, right? And be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And how you doing, babe? My wife is on the Honor of Minds. Always check her out on TikTok, YouTube, or website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Right? This is what's there. But persons are upset and frustrated. It's like at a time. This is why, once again, we also have to recognize that for some of us, the answer is what Yah says. Hopefully one day all of us, but we know that some won't go. But that's why the answer at some point is going to be, we got to separate. And we got to make sure the persons are taken care of. We have to support each other. We have to support each other's businesses because we can't support persons who are trying their best to say, hey, just don't talk about it and we'll act like everybody's okay. Meanwhile, here you are bleeding out. Minister Malcolm Shabazz, that's who we know as Minister Malcolm X, he once said, if you put a knife in my back and you put it in my body and the knife is 6 inches deep, just because you pulled it out 2 inches doesn't mean that you pulled the knife out. Nobody's saying that there hasn't been any progress. Some might argue that. Some might say it's even worse. The knife is now sticking through the chest, back through the chest. But, nobody's here to try and tell you that there hasn't been any change or whatever, or that you haven't tried to contribute or anything like that. But hear what I'm saying. Just because the knife is 2 inches, been pulled 2 inches out, there's still 4 inches to go. And what's going to hurt with the body that's been stabbed is that when you pull it out, every little bit you pull it out, it's going to hurt as it comes out. Matter of fact, some might tell you it actually hurts more coming out than it hurts going in. But you keep trying to deny the stab. You keep talking about a stab wound. There's not even the wound. The knife is still there. So when are we going to talk about the knife? Or are we going to talk about the knife? Or are we going to keep trying to act like, yeah, you guys are just, that's what they say, you blacks, y'all just be talking about stuff. You're not trying to make anything work. But when do we start saying, okay, the knife should come out, and then the knife has to go out, then healing has to happen, surgery has to happen, inner healing has to happen, outer healing has to happen. We have to fight against infection. We have to make sure that the disease doesn't come through now and start eating things up or whatever. We don't want to have that conversation. It's not enough to just say, oh yeah, that's what they really mean when they say get over it. They say, man, look, it's hard to pull a knife out. I might have put it in 6 inches, but I pulled it out 1 inch. Shut up. That's what they in essence are saying. And you're saying that we need knife. So this is when we have to realize if the person who stabbed you, even if they feel bad about it, won't pull the knife out, then maybe we shouldn't trust them with a bunch of other things with the body. Can I say it again? Because somebody's not going to like that. But let me say it again. If the person who put the knife in you, right, may not even like what they did, but they had the stomach to stab you, but they don't have the stomach to make sure they take the knife out, then maybe we should need to make sure that they're not part of the body. And I didn't say the white man. Anybody who puts a knife in us, anybody who supports a system that puts a knife in us and doesn't have the stomach to make sure that they can help take the knife out, then leave us alone. You want us to forgive stuff that's not even done. You want us to forgive the person that's not even, and I'm not even trying to say that we shouldn't have a mind of forgiveness, but I want you to realize what you think. You believe that somebody should forgive you for something that you have not done, which is they should forgive you, right, See, you think I'm going to a place I didn't do slavery. No, no, no. You think that somebody should forgive you because you have not done anything. You hear what I'm saying? Some of y'all think people you should. And some people try to gaslight you. Like you ain't been stabbed. Like they didn't say, let's even come out of racism for a second. Some person try to gaslight you. Oh man, you talking so much about that. You talking so much about that. Why are you always talking about this? Why are you always talking about that? I didn't do anything. I cheated, but it was 25 years ago. But you never. First of all, this is the first time you admitted that you did. Number one, which would make somebody angry again. Right. Number two, you never did anything to do it, and you still cheating. This is the first time you finally out your mouth said something and you never asked for forgiveness, you never done blah, blah. You just like somebody should get over it or whatever. That's what y'all sound like. In essence, that's what happens on the daily. And they want you and I to keep on forgiving and forgiving and forgiving and acting like stuff's not really happening and acting like we done lost our mind and making us feel bad. But if somebody doing you wrong, right, biblically speaking, not only should they ask for forgiveness, but now faith without works. Where's your works? See, I tell persons this all the time. Forgiveness is not that difficult. Believe it or not, a lot of persons forgive. A lot of y'all who stay together, even after all types of things happen, not just cheating, but terrible words are exchanged, or things can be done to person's family members, or maybe there was some kind of abuse, physically, emotionally, etc., psychologically. Yeah, there are going to be all these different things that are going on, right? But even if you forgive the person, the next step, which is really difficult, is building up trust. And because it's difficult, many persons don't have the stomach. See, a lot of persons have the stomach to call you a B, for example. But that hurts. And when you got to now do the work to have that person get over you calling them a B, you don't want to do it. Somebody talk about your mama, and all of a sudden you don't want to do the work that it takes to trust because you talk about somebody's mama. That's difficult for a lot, right? You don't have the ability. You got the strength to call somebody mama or whatever, but you ain't got the strength to make sure that you build up trust again. And everybody wants to come to us talking about trust us. What have you done to build it? Hey, let us live in your house. What have you done? You stripped the foundation. I can't live in my house. Then somebody comes through and says, hey, we should learn our own language. Why do you want to learn your own language? Learn ours. I already know yours. You forced us to. But let us in at the cookout. How you get automatic stuff at the cookout? Well, I can dance. So what? I can dance too. And they don't like when you talk to them like that because that suggests that one has power. You ever thought about that? If you have power, it's a problem. That's what it is. Because you're not supposed to have power. It suggests that you have power. If I can look the racists in the face and say, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do what I do. It's not supposed to be like that, is it? It's just not. It's not supposed to be like that. I can look up the person who tries to tell, see, person don't like this. Somebody can come to me and say, you're creationist, you can't say anything scientifically. I said, well, hold up. What about gas, liquid, solid? What about the sun, the moon, and the stars when they were introduced? And what about the fact that herb, yield, and tea was there first? And what about the fact that you did have to have water, it's not primary ooze? And what about the fact that you did have to have somebody who created different things? Because how does hydrogen somehow evolve into oxygen, and somehow oxygen somehow evolves into gold, and somehow gold will evolve into, uranium, and it's all that. Like, you can't explain it. You have to have more faith for what you talk about than I do, because you can't explain to me how oxygen came into being without somebody creating it. That's right. How dare you know who you are? Solomon used to say it all the time, not that, but he used to say, how dare you? Right? How dare you know who you are? You're not supposed to have power. This is what they fight over. You are not supposed to be powerful. God says different though. Then that's when they have to start changing the word, because then it has to be, I don't care what Yah says. That was something else that happened in the Hodge Twins episode too. If you know who I'm even talking about or whatever, but when they had the guy, Amazing Lucas on, and they were having all that conversation, everything's going on. And he says, well, you guys talking about this or whatever, what about, because they go, well, why are you always talking about this? Like, you always talk about when we was kings and stuff, when we was kings. And he goes, why y'all say it like that? He said, why you keep saying when we was kings? Why y'all say it like that? He said, are you familiar with the history of Africa, the history of black persons? That we did have kings, yes, that we do have some of that. The ones of us that did actually come through Africa, yes, we were kings and stuff. And then guess what they said? I don't care about black people. He said, finally, thanks for admitting it. Right? Right? In the buffoonery, he says, thanks for finally admitting. Right? Thank you for finally admitting that. That's because that's in essence what it is. And then during that, there was a so-called white Palestinian who started saying, we're all N-words to the Jews. And he said, excuse me, what you say? You don't get to say that word. And then he said, what? And he said, you know what, man, F and N-word. And so the black dude starts going over there, and the two black dudes, the hot twins, decide they're going to stand up. And he says, look at this. So you're defending the one you're standing up for, but that's what happens. See, I'm trying to tell you, it's the system. The system has persons thinking that they're defending righteousness or doing or whatever, and a lot of it is because of self-hatred. Even the so-called white person that thinks that you're worse because you're a so-called black person has to hate themselves, because only one who hates themselves can hate somebody else. I'm going to say that again because you missed that, right? Only one who hates themselves can hate somebody else. No man has ever hated his own flesh. That's why you would share, but he nourishes and cherishes it. That's why you love your wife, because you love yourself. If you hate your wife, the only reason you can hate your wife is because you hate yourself. And one who hates themselves is really not a true man. If you hate yourself, we got to help you out. We got to get you back on track, brother, because that's when it's toxic. That's when you're not masculine. Those who are masculine love themselves so much that they would never allow themselves to treat somebody in a manner they wouldn't want to be treated. That's true masculinity, right? This whole toxic masculinity came from persons who are supposed to be men, so-called white men, who are not even attracted to men, right? So I'm not going to use that as my barometer. I know a lot of our sisters have, I know a lot of our brothers have. I'm not doing it, right? Those there are two so-called white persons that are not even attracted to men, so they say, and they came up with a term called toxic masculinity. That's not for us. Maybe they see that in themselves because they obviously hate themselves and hate masculinity. And if they hate masculinity, then anybody who's masculine is an enemy of theirs, so they be toxic. We don't care where these terms come from, though. So anyway, we're continuing to go. I know I told you to say, it'd be rough sometimes anyways, but I told you it's going to be a rough one today. I told y'all if persons didn't like what we talked about on Friday, it's going to be rough today because we're going deeper. All right, watch this. This is what Charles Darwin has said. For those of us who try to say he was an abolitionist, so therefore he couldn't be racist. Let's hear what Charles Darwin has to say. You guys ready? I want you guys to be ready for this. I want you guys, you don't have to be at the edge of your seat, but I want your ears open so that your eyes can be open to the nonsense and the bull hockey that they continue to try and put upon us in this institution called the West, or the beast, or the so-called government. This is what Charles Darwin said. I don't want to hear about Charles Darwin as an abolitionist. I don't want to hear because you're on the left, you can't hate somebody because of the color of their skin and all this stuff. Right? This is what Charles Darwin said. He said, I have watched how steadily the general feeling as shown at election has been rising against slavery. What a proud thing for England, if she is the first European nation which utterly abolishes it. I was told before leaving England that after living in slave countries, all my opinions would be altered, right? The only alteration I am aware of is forming a much higher estimate of the Negro character. It is impossible to see the Negro and not feel kindly towards him. Such cheerful, open, honest expressions, and such muscular bodies. With such being the case, the question becomes, how much higher did Darwin's estimate become? Because he said, you must think highly of him. Okay, well, how much higher did it get? It is good, it is to bind, it's good that he did not consider slavery to be justified, but did he consider the enslaved to be equal to himself? The answer is a clear no. The answer is what? A clear no. In his book, The Descent of Man, which explores the theory of natural selection and its implications upon humanity, Darwin offers an explanation for the great break in the organic chain, which some pointed to as evidence contradicting his theory, saying that these breaks depend merely on the number of related forms which have become extinct. He then proceeds to give an illustration, right? He then proceeds to what? Give an illustration. Okay, so what is the illustration? What is the illustration he gives? Well, at some period not very distant from as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break will then be rendered wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, as we may hope that the Caucasian and some apes as low as a baboon, instead of as at present between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. Did you catch that? What is Charles Darwin saying here? Darwin has presented a scale displaying his perceptions of the graduated development of species. He hoped that by means of the preservation of favored races, the biological gap between species will be more like the distance between the white man and baboon, instead of the closely related, as he views it, black man and gorilla, when discussing the way that the different races or subspecies of man have developed. Salah. Did you catch it? Did you catch it? Did you see it? Did you hear it? This is Charles Darwin. This is their champion. This is their teacher. This is the one who they're learning from. Am I making anything up? I'm going to read what he said one more again. Right? I'm going to read what he said one more again. And then we're going to talk about it some. Hey, Grand Rising, Brother Craig. I'm going to read what he said in this part. So he's basically in this, what they just did, they told you about both books. Once again, what are the titles of Charles Darwin's book? One in 1859 is talking about the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. The second book is talking about the descent of man and how you can look at what different types of species or races are attracted to. It's right there. Okay? So watch this. At some, right? At some, hold on one second. At some future period, not very distant from as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. The break will then be rendered wider, for it will intervene between man and a more civilized state, as we may hope. Then the Caucasian and some apes as low as a baboon, instead of as at present between the Negro or Australian, right, which they're talking about the indigenous Australian, right, so the Negro or Negroid, and the gorilla. In other words, he's saying that the gorilla and Negro are extremely close on the evolutionary scale, while the so-called Caucasian or white man, which Caucasian is a really bad term to use for all white persons, that being said, the so-called Caucasian or white man, right, is in between him and the baboon. At some point, he says, either black persons are going to have to become, right, they're so bad, just give it a few centuries, he says they're going to literally become so different from each other. By the way, this is what, let me finish my thought. They'll become so different from each other, it'll be like talking about a white man to a baboon now. That'll be what the difference is between the white man and the so-called black man, or hopefully, he said, which is our hope. He said, hopefully, so-called black persons will just disappear off the planet. That all you got, MT 656 or 655? Come on, I know. You know, in the stupidity that you're espousing, you should be able to come up with something at least funny, right? But you see what's going on here? And once again, as I said, somebody comes on and attacks you, and when somebody attacks you, it's supposed to be funny or it's supposed to be intelligent, right? Look at that black person up there with locks. He must smell. Look at this black person on here on a live session. By the way, on a live session on several platforms, several devices, right? A device can actually charge all the other devices, things like that. Able to travel, able to help his people out, do all these different things. But what do they say? Get a job. Because as we said earlier, Charles Darwin made scientific racism acceptable. They didn't have scientific terms. So Darwin, supposedly, at least Darwin supporters, Darwin apologists will tell you and I, oh yes, Charles Darwin was an abolitionist. He was somebody that said at some point, so-called black persons and so-called white persons will continue to be separated. And you know who also espouses this thought process and teaches this? Matter of fact, I believe he said it on the Joe Rogan show. I'm pretty sure I'm accurate about that. So you can go look it up. I'm giving you breadcrumbs. Go find it and research and see what I'm saying, see if it's true or not. Study to show yourself approved. Somebody who talked about us in the same manner as far as the reason why it was great that Christopher Columbus actually came and delivered us. He was a jerk, but if it wasn't for Christopher Columbus, hold on one second, guys. Hold on one second. Give me a second. Excuse me. So, according to them, right, this person, who you guys know, well, not even you know, I guess it's his name, and Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's why I say not all skin folk is skin folk. Neil deGrasse Tyson also has the same belief. Right? He's on the Joe Rogan show, and he said, hey, as much as Columbus is a jerk, and he was a jerk. Now, jerk is really nice because, you know, do you call somebody a jerk who R words little girls, like, you know, 8-year-olds, to the point to where, you know, the 8-year-olds die? That rough and that crazy? You know? Do we do that? Or somebody who, do we call somebody a jerk who doesn't want to waste bullets? So he says instead of taking the gun to newborn babies' heads, he says instead take a hammer to them so we can save bullets. You know, jerk is being very nice. Oh, okay. I don't know if I can undo it. Craig, if you're still with us, if it timed you out, the timeout, yeah, I don't think I can reverse it. I don't know how. I'll try to see if I can look that up one day. Brother Craig, if you're still with us, somebody accidentally timed you out. They were looking for, they were trying to get at somebody else. Okay. Hopefully you're still with us. If not, I'll reach out to you. If I don't see you come up later, I'll reach out to you. It was an accident. And how you doing, Helen? And how's everybody doing? How you doing, Shirley? But Neil deGrasse Tyson says that even though, you know, Columbus might have been a jerk, I guess we're being nice to him for whatever reason. He says if it wasn't for Christopher Columbus, man would have been too evolved because they would have had sexual relationships only on different sides of the planet, and they wouldn't have been able to do anything. Now, this is a lie number one because even as far as so-called white persons, Leif Erikson was here way before Christopher Columbus, right? And we know that there were persons that were enslaving so-called black persons, you know, from Americas before Columbus, right? We also know that there were so-called black persons who were traveling back and forth between South America and Central America, and even North America, right? And Africa. We also know that there were Chinese persons that were coming over through Alaska and coming down through Canada, what we call Canada now, and that were even living in the West Coast before they were actually beginning to be, you know, mistreated over here in the Americas later on. We know this, right? So, number one, to say that persons who were already mixing, especially so-called Africans, so-called Hebrews, Israelites, so-called Native Americans, were already mixing. We have evidence of this because Christopher Columbus, who brings a Hebrew interpreter over with him to Hispaniola, which is the colonized name of what we now call Haiti, and the colonized name Dominican Republic, right? And we know that when they had conversation, that they told him, yeah, we're aware, not only aware, but we mix with persons and we use the same stuff. We make the same type of weapons that they make in West Africa. And, you know, the way that it normally works is Europeans not going to believe that unless a European vouches for it. So Spain vouched for it. They studied it over in West Africa. They studied it in Spain. And also the Vatican vouched for it. That it was the same metallurgy, the same weapons, the same way of making the weapons. But Neil deGrasse Tyson says, if it was not for Christopher Columbus, then you would have had two different types of human beings. And they would have been so far from each other that they wouldn't have even been able to copulate at some point down the road. This is because he's informed by Darwin. This is what I was saying earlier. Somebody who was getting on and talking about this stuff. I'm not talking about because you're white, you're blah, blah, because you're black, you're blah, blah. I'm saying these are the beliefs of Darwin, and these things were taught in the system. And if we want to reverse the curse, we must revisit the lie. that Darwin and his friends participated in and still influence you to this day. How you doing, Popeye? Adnan and Buchanan, if I miss anybody on. Yeah, it's very horrible, Sister Jennifer. Right? That's why I say this is not child's play. It's hard stuff to deal with, but it's the truth. It's difficult to have honest dialogue about this. It really is. I get it. I don't like hearing it either. I don't bring this to you because I'm trying to get shock value and all that. I bring this to you because somebody needs to tell you the truth. They needs to tell you why you've been taught to hate one another and tell you that there's an opportunity for us to stop hating. We don't have to continue down the same road of inquisition. We don't have to follow this. We don't have to ignore it. Matter of fact, if we would stop ignoring it, realizing what happened, and then say, okay, we'll make sure that we put things in place so that this never happens again. It's not going to never happen again because we don't talk about it or we don't admit that we live in this curse. It's going to happen. We're going to come out of the curse when we admit, oh yeah, you know what, like this did happen. This did curse us, and this did cause confusion, and this did cause persons to fight against one another. Yes, it did all those things, but we don't have to continue it. And if there are those that continue it, hey, it's only a matter of time before we separate anyways, and then we won't have to worry about it there. And we'll make sure that we teach persons even when we separate, because guess what? When we separate, we still need to make sure that our children know about it so that when persons try to come in and try to act like they're going to do what they did before or try to present some weird picture to us as if everybody was sitting down with some cornucopia and having fruit and vegetables and getting along with a turkey that was smiling and everything and everybody was speaking the same language and agreed. No, we didn't trust them back then.
Not the turkey smiling.
I'm saying, you remember that, right? Y'all remember that the turkey was smiling and stuff when you were in school? Y'all remember that they used to have the turkey? Matter of fact, did y'all ever see in school? I don't know. You know, everybody's school experience is probably slightly different. In elementary school, they used to have this turkey, and the turkey was always he was dressed like a pilgrim. They had it like so embedded. It was so weird the stuff that they do, but they're trying to put in your mindset of all the stuff supposed to be together. Right? How you doing? Is it Shalea? Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Thanks for being part of the community. Right? And how you doing, Aaron? Right? But they're doing this to get you and I off the scent, off the trail. If you didn't know this, right? Most of us have probably never even had to deal with this. But let's just say, you know, somebody's trying to run away like our ancestors are, right, on the Underground Railroad. When the dogs get a hold of you, what do they use the dogs for when they're running after you? To get your what? To get your scent, right? And the dogs use your scent with their scent glands and everything. They use your scent to find you. If you want to get the dog off your scent, you have to do some pretty interesting things, don't you? Right? Like you can't just keep running in the straight line. If you want somebody to get off the scent, you can't just keep it straight. I'm going somewhere. The Holy Spirit got his work because I was not even thinking about this at all to this second. Right? But let's be honest, right? If I'm running from some dogs and the dogs are chasing, I can't just keep running straight in an area. I might have to try and maybe get in some mud. I might have to try and jump in some water. I might have to try and get something in my body that smells stronger, but you maybe pour food on you or something like that. You might have to climb up really, really high and then get down and then take your feet in a certain direction to come back and climb up high again, then go in another direction to climb up high. You know, do something so that the dogs at least it takes them a minute, right, to figure out what the strongest scent is or which direction to go, and hopefully they go in the wrong direction. I say all that because here it is. I'm not trying to compare us to dog, but hopefully you get the context. Here it is. We're getting closer. And have you noticed that as you keep getting closer and closer, they start throwing a whole bunch of weird stuff at you, don't they? And thank you for being on. I appreciate you. Right? There's a whole bunch of interesting stuff. You're getting closer and closer and closer, and instead of them doing what you're right, they're making sure, wait a minute, let's jump to this, and let's do this, and let's say, well, I wasn't there, and let's say, why are you a snowflake? And let's say, this doesn't happen, and let's start burning books, and let's start saying, man, we're all just shades of wheat, and we're just shades of brown, right? Like, let's do anything we can. Let's not put the full title of Charles Darwin's book there. Let's say that why are you looking at the Bible? The Bible is whitewashed. Meanwhile, well, if it's whitewashed, then what's the original look like? Right? Like they're throwing all different types of stuff because we get close. Some of us are there in many different ways, but I'm just saying we're getting close. Just like when dogs come in, if you want the dog to get off your scent, you got to do a lot of wild, crazy stuff that you would think. You'll see people do really, persons that you didn't think could jump over stuff. Let a dog chase you. Some of y'all know about that back in the day. You grew up in the hood, somebody's dog got loose, or the police let them dogs out on people and stuff, and you running. And there were some times you didn't think you could make it over that fence. Let a dog chase you. You figure out how to do some amazing things, right? Here it is that we're getting closer to the truth and closer to the truth, and you're seeing a person do all types of gymnastic, crazy flips with these words and verbiage and stuff like that in history. And you're like, this stuff is, you guys are way off. And wait a minute, how did you guys even do that? Matter of fact, what is it? Wilmington, North Carolina, where they committed genocide against our people there, 1898. Wilmington, North Carolina, if you go down there, a lot of persons don't know, still to this day, there's a blank spot where there used to be a newspaper from back then, 1898. There's still a blank spot on property where they don't even allow anything, they don't even allow grass to grow there. To make sure that you can't find any evidence of it. And up until the 1990s or the early 2000s, I believe it's the 1990s, up until the 1990s, you could not even go to North Carolina libraries and ask about any book talking about Wilmington, North Carolina. What kind of gymnastics is that? Literally, where you have turned the state, the whole state had to become dumber, or excuse me, that's not the proper term, had to become more stupid. You made sure that you kept the state so-called ignorant so that you could make sure a person didn't know that you actually went against the federal government, the state government, you offed some of your own people, you ran out all the black persons, you had them living in cemeteries for days, weeks, some of them. Had them living in cemeteries over the body that you were just freshly killed. They made sure the whole state, until the 1990s, it was against the law. See, they were talking about the 60s, 50s, the 1800s. No. Until the 1990s, it was against the law. If you went somewhere and you said, hey, I want to get a book on Wilmington, North Carolina, somebody would be like, oh, hold up. Because you're getting close. See, the closer you get, start looking for the flips, right? Start looking for the things. When you start really getting the scent, right? Because they know that they understand that the dog that has the scent glands also has some teeth. And has been sent on a mission to make sure that they not only smell you out, right? If the dog is close, remember, they'll tell you, get on the ground, stuff like that. When they got the dog, they don't even pull the guns out. If they pull the guns and the dogs out, it's really something. But they don't even pull the guns out. Why? Because if you're going to try to fight dog, you're going to lose. Especially trained dog, and let them be 4, 5 of them, you might as well lay down. No matter if you're innocent or not, right? They understand that we are on the scent and on the trail. And the Most High is leading and guiding us. And has us in a place to where now you see them do all types of stuff, but it gets to a place to where you ain't gonna be nothing but just what? At some point they finally gotta lay down. This is when you have the conversation that changes from the intellectual, the scientific racism and all that, to now they finally have to lay down and just admit, fine, you got me. Yeah, okay, we don't like you. This is why Nick Fuentes now is coming up with stuff, and Tucker Carlson is now coming up with stuff, and just saying, yeah, okay, you know what, racism, white people have every right to be racist. They're not even running away from it anymore. It used to be, we won't talk about it. This is how the Hodge twins, two so-called black persons, have the most infamous and famous, matter of fact, ran for president of the United States, ran for governor, almost won until they found out some other things about him, but ran for president of the United States as a KKK member. He's looked up to by the greatest of racists, point to him. Some of them think he's as great as Hitler, right? And he's on their show talking about white, the white eradication. The people are trying to outdo white people. They're literally they got this dude. How you doing, Brother Lamont? They got this dude on the show. The person is still lifting him up, and they dare tell us that racism is not real and this and that or whatever. Now you got them at a place to where it's hard. Now you're starting to see the trolls come out. You're starting to see persons try to use this because you can't use the same rhetoric. We got the evidence. We have persons now. We got jelly griots. We got historians. We have some of us everyday Joes. And I'm not saying I'm better. I'm just saying whatever you do in your life, whatever we do. Some of you, when you go to your job all day, if you working at the store, if you're working at the fast food restaurant, if you're working at the warehouse, if you're working your 9 to 5, if you're working for the government, if you work wherever, this is something now where it's like you can't hide this. It used to be before, you used to be able to tell us, man, don't worry about it, they're just talking, because we couldn't literally just say, oh yeah, historically, we can go boom, 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 boom. Now we can. You guys say that you're Israelites. You're not really Israelites. Although Equiano says something different. He's slave, West Africa. No, nobody was really racist. It was just the times and stuff like that. Charles Darwin says different. Wait a minute, they didn't want to put this stuff in on purpose. Nobody did this on purpose. Charles Darwin's grandfather/father says different. No, they weren't saying that black people don't know how to love each other and their love is better even if their love is worse. Charles Darwin married to his own cousin. I mean, you see what I'm saying? They can't hide now. They can't hide it. So what do they do now? The only thing left is, well, F it. Yeah, we don't like y'all. Okay. And by the way, that to be honest, that's less of an impediment than it is to the persons that lie and say, oh no, we really like you, but no. Like just go ahead and say it, and if that's the case, cool, because it makes my life easier. You know why? Because now I can just say, hey, that person over there, they don't like nobody, because once again, to hate anybody, you have to hate yourself. We shouldn't worry about that. If you pray for them, pray that they come into the knowledge of Yah. Until then, everything else you're praying for is not going to happen. Focus your prayer, focus your energy, focus your life on persons who are not just allies, because allies are persons who sign treaties, but they're not part of your nation. You're either with us or you're against us. And just because you're against us doesn't mean I won't make sure that I trade with you from time to time and give you food. But if you're with us, you're with us. If you're against us, you're against us. It makes life a lot easier when we tell the truth. I don't have to lie to my children and try to tell them, no, racism's not really that real, and all of this, and we get to, and really we can sing Kumbaya, and there's no such thing as the black church or the white church. The church is for everybody. While meanwhile, there's black churches being bombed because the persons in them are black. How many white churches were bombed because the persons in them were white? What do you say, Charles Darwin, theory of evolution? Yep, marries his first cousin. I'm going to ask that again, right? See, this is when we got to get out stuff. We have to be honest and have real dialogue. I know this is tiring for some, and believe it or not, it's tiring and stressful for me at some point, because it's like, dang, how many times am I going to say it? But this is why I try to give it to you, at least for some of you who are on here. You've seen we're going deeper, and we're going to other places with it, because I want you to see that the rabbit hole runs deep, right? But you talk about all this stuff, there's no such thing as the white church and the black church. How many churches have been bombed throughout the history of mankind because the persons inside of them were white? I'm not even saying the answer is zero. I'm saying, give me a... Matter of fact, watch this. Do you know that when they talk about school shootings, guess when the first school shooting, at least the first school shooting in America on file, if you will, that's written about. Guess when that first school shooting happened? You'd be surprised. Some of y'all think that school shootings just started in the 1990s because of what happened over in, I forget where, Colorado, wherever that was in Colorado. Right? But guess what? First school shootings happened back in 1853. And guess who did it? The child of a slave owner. Now, interestingly enough, if I'm just going to be honest about it, he didn't shoot up the slaves, because he don't got to shoot up the slaves, because the slaves can't do nothing. He shot up his teacher, right? A white man, so-called white man, because his teacher demanded excellence, not from him, but from his brother. He had already had situations at several schools before that to where they say, hey, this student, something wrong with him, he's going to probably shoot everything up. He went and did exactly what everybody was telling them. They had a whole case, everything. They looked like he was going to get off. Matter of fact, I think he actually was, ended up being said to be innocent, and all the persons in the town tore the whole city up to the point where they had to send him to yet another plantation in another state that his family owned. And then I forget what happened there. I think he actually, unfortunately, I ain't trying to say whatever, because I haven't helped anybody in. I think he ended up getting shot. But Columbine is not by far the first school shooting. The first school shooting happened in 1853. It's 1863, or a matter of fact, it might be 1863. I don't know, 1853 or 1863. Somebody can look that up for yourself. Right? So even when you say, yeah, I get what y'all mean, that there's supposed to be one church or one assembly or one whatever, right? But the reality is, see, y'all talking to somebody who wasn't raised in it, but was in it for like 15, really 10 years before I started thinking I might need to come out of it. About 15 years before I started saying officially, okay, like I'm kind of done with it or whatever. And then, like basically, I think 2021 was the end of us helping out somebody as far as on a regular basis. If somebody's feeding the community, doing something like that, yeah, let's work together, right? But as far as like feeding into the mixing of iron and clay teaching and stuff, no, right? But they won't teach you that because, right? But they won't teach. And I've been in church long enough to recognize. I was in Cirque long enough though. I know what the white church looks like because I played it. Even if I didn't preach at it, I preached a couple times in places like this. But even if I didn't preach, I played music. I was a musician. A lot of persons, would use me for the musician part more so than they would the preaching and teaching. So, right? So I played at the so-called white church. I played at the so-called black church. I played at the so-called light-skinned church. Yeah, those exist too. I played at the so-called dark-skinned church. I played at the poor church, where they ain't got no money. I played at the rich church where they got a whole bunch. I played at the church that is international, which usually international is usually code for whatever they're trying to say. The Spanish church that got a couple families in there, they're international. A white church that has a couple black families, they're international. I played at them. I played at them. I've taught at them. I've sat in the background. I've listened to the conversation that they've had, etc. And yes, there's still division because here's something for you as well. Nobody want to talk about. Before you got saved, I want you to know this. Before you got saved, racism was real, and after you got saved, racism is still real. I'm 6'5.5". When I used to be suited and booted, 6'5.5", 3-piece suit, walking down the street, women would clutch their pearls and run to the other side, looking like a 6-figure man, even though I wasn't making it, right? But looking like a 6-figure man, sharp, nice suits, right? Well, like they used to say, one of the weirdest things, but like they said, casket sharp, right? And women would jump to the other side of the street, right? I ended up being somebody who then ends up looking like I'm doing stuff like that now. Women still jumping to the other side of the street. Matter of fact, it's interesting. Some of them don't because some of them think of me as being of a different culture, which I am. And so a lot of persons think that, black persons from other places, they've been taught, just like we've been taught, that they should have more sense. So some of them treat me different, right? Especially depending on what I'm wearing, right? But it's the truth. I've seen the rich church versus the poor church. I've seen the rich church and the poor church right next door. Some of y'all want to, and we wouldn't call it racism. Y'all don't want to call it bigotry, but in a sense it is. But when the Kojic church is right next door to the Holiness Church, and the Holiness Church is next door to the Baptist Church, and the Baptist Church is next to the Southern Baptist Church, and the Southern Baptist Church is next to the Episcopalian, and the Episcopalian Church is next to the AME. Usually Episcopalian and AME would be far away, but you know what I'm saying. And the Methodist Church is next to and so on and so forth, and the Lutheran Church, and this and that. And I'm telling you, I grew up on a place where there were 33 churches on one street. Franconia Road. Well, I guess part of my growing up, I wasn't there my whole childhood, but I grew up, one of the places I grew up essentially was a place called Franconia Road, Alexandria, Virginia. If you start on Franconia Road and you go all the way down, I don't know how many of them still there or whatever, I don't know if there's more, but we used to count. It's a long, long road, by the way. It's not a short road, it's extremely long, right? That being said, go down Franconia Road, we counted 33 churches. Some of them doing well, some of them falling apart. In the midst of that, by the way, there'd be a lot of churches that were having services in high schools and, different things like that. So there's even more than that, but 33 churches, some of them falling apart, none of them helping each other. None of them making sure that they work together to make the neighborhood together as a whole because they are raised to be against each other. You said, a light-skinned church? I'm telling you. Some people might not like, I'm telling you, look, man, and really, okay, the light-skinned church, see, you don't like it when I say this, so I'll say it like this, the family church. Because a lot of times there's churches too that's just about a family. You go in there and you can be doing what's righteous or whatever. It don't matter what the pastor say, it matters what the family say. If the family don't say it, then you don't move. It's not the pastor. There's places to where women preach and men shut up. There's places where men preach and women shut up. Way more of them, if we be honest. But a lot of them have come into being the other way, as a retort, as a response. How you doing, Robbie? Right? So when we talk about this stuff is real. It's diabolical. It's real. There's a place where you better not come in with nobody in a mixed relationship, so-called, whatever that word that you want to use, mixed couple. Some places where, hey, you better be all white, you better be all black. Hey, some places, okay, you better be all mixed, which is a weird thing that's been popping up too. Because we teach this all the time. If you're anybody getting into any relationship just because, right? I want to tell you, if you think that being with somebody, especially if you're in the so-called mixed, I hate using these terms because they're not real. They're not real, right? Is your nationality is who you are, not your color, right? Two black persons could sit right next to each other. Matter of fact, two twins, Jacob and Esau, could be in the same womb and still produce two nations. That's how nationality works. Not because you came from the same womb, but because of your nationality, your nation. Just because we're brothers doesn't mean that we want to be part of the same nation. That's why two can be in one house and three against that, and three be one house and two against that. That's how mother could be against daughter, and son against father, and mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and son-in-law against father-in-law. It's about nationality. The only reason why you don't look at the Bible like that is because of racism. That's the reason why you don't realize that America has never been integrated, because to be integrated means to be one. In order to be one, everybody in the country got to be the same family. That's why Uzbekistan or I just said that wrong, or Taiwan or Japan, they're a country, they're a nation. You know why? Because they're all the same family. I know you don't like that. That's how nations work. That's why the nations are named after families. Mm-hmm. Russians are family. I'm not saying that there can't be different types of different cousins and different sects and all this stuff. And I said sex, S-E-C-T-S. Right? I'm not saying all, but hear what I'm saying. That's what a nation is. It's a family. You just don't know that. That's why every nation has an official language, because even language, tongue are synonyms for nation, for country, for state, for estate, for territory. Well, no, territory a little different. We've been taught to fight each other because we've been taught to fight ourselves. Back to Darwin. Darwin also said, watch this, and he would refer to his own editorial labors he spent on his books with the same baneful analogy. This is what he said. This is what he said, not I said. I'm sorry, this is what he said. This is what he said, okay? You ready? This is what Darwin said. Darwin said, but on my life, no N-word with lash over him could have worked harder at clearness than I have done. Yeah, he threw an N-word out there. Now, but his supporters, usually in the scientific community, who need to make sure that they clean Darwin up for you, tell you he can't be racist. He was an abolitionist. He was a leftist. He would have been a Republican of his time. Let me read what he said again. He said, but on my life, no N-word with lash over him could have worked harder at clearness than I have done. In other words, man, if you were an N-word, you couldn't have made things more clear to me. You're not on my level. You're not intelligent enough. You're not smart enough to make stuff as clear as I do. N-word with the hard R. This is Charles Darwin. This is why when I say this stuff, like once again, the series is called To Reverse the Curse. We must revisit the lie. You got to revisit the lie. You got to go back and say, wait a minute. If we say that we believe that it's righteousness, then how do we get to keep throwing out this hard R thing? Why do y'all keep supporting these young cats out here because they say the hard R? So we see that even though Darwin was personally against the institution of slavery, he still fully considered his own race to be widely superior to blacks, and employed the vernacular of the plantation when speaking in safety of his letters. He viewed the world through racist eyes, and his theory reflects that truth. I need you to hear that again. He used the vernacular, he used the words, he used the mindset of the plantation, although he said he was against what kept slaves on the plantation. In the Bible, we would call this double-minded. Right? In the Bible, we would call this double-minded. Two-faced. I'm looking for the scientific term. I don't know why this is so. Term for double-minded. It should be right up in my face. Well, they have something that I wasn't even looking for, but this is better. Dissociative identity disorder, which involves multiple distinct personalities, or double consciousness, if you will, particularly when referring to the internal conflict of belonging to two cultures. Here we go. It's about culture. Right? That's why we talk so much about culture. See, belonging to two cultures is considered to be a mental disorder. Did you know that? Now, it depends on the context, right? That being said, it can be described, right? Being double-minded can be described as dissociative identity disorder, or DID, dissociative identity disorder, which involves multiple distinct personalities, or simply as double consciousness, particularly when referring to the internal conflict of belonging to two cultures. Another relevant scientific concept is the split brain phenomenon, right? One of us at SOC has coined the phrase the smooth brain phenomenon, right? But the split brain phenomenon, where two cerebral hemispheres function separately. In other words, for somebody to believe that they should get rid of slavery while at the same time speaking about the persons who they're saying should be free at using the same slave words, literally is somebody who is crazy. But this would make sense if you recognize that Charles Darwin's family is notorious for inbreeding and incest. It's two cultures in his head. He recognizes that slavery is bad. Remember, Charles Darwin didn't go to school to be a scientist. He went to school to preach. Something in him recognizes. He even said when he was younger. Remember, we were fair. When you go back to when he's a young man, years before, in 1833, he doesn't write his first book when talking about preserving favored races in the struggle for life. Charles Darwin, in 1833, when he writes, before he even writes, he says, hey, as a young man, he writes and says, man, you know what? Being around persons who are dark skinned is amazing and awesome and this and that. He says you can't help but be around them and feel happy and feel jovial, and they're very great persons. We were honest in that assessment, right? We told the truth. But we keep on reading, and he starts saying, yeah, but these N-words ain't on my level. He was raised by a father/grandfather who has writings himself and was trying to push his community to ensure that they started strategically and systematically putting things in place to continue manifest destiny. And he said this needed to be done because his race needed to be pure. Now, granted, it wasn't just only dark-skinned persons or persons of different shades, but certain white persons he didn't believe were on his level either. Charles Darwin grows up in this. By the way, Charles Darwin marries his cousin, and his children deal with a lot of mental health issues. Once again, Charles Darwin has what you might even refer to as DID, dissociative identity disorder, which means that he had double consciousness. He had multiple personalities, right? Multiple distinct personalities, right? Who were trying to live in his head at the same time. And it's usually when you're dealing with two different cultures that conflict against each other, this happens inside one's head. Right? By the end of this, by now, if somebody's trying to argue that racism doesn't affect stuff, Charles Darwin didn't affect science, there's no such thing as scientific method of notation being changed, although Charles Darwin basically essentially introduces what we now call today scientific racism, you're keeping up for something that you're looking crazy on now. But we're running out of time. Let's keep on reading. No one best, watch this, no one best exemplifies the inherent racism found, right? Hear this, beloved. No one best, what does it say? Nobody, according to them, no one best, right, shows this inherent racism found in Darwin's preservation of the favored races than his cousin and fellow scientist. His cousin and fellow scientist, Francis Galton. This is also his brother-in-law. They don't say that because, you'd have to admit even further. Even though they're telling us the truth, you notice they're still trying to be nice because this is family they talk about. Right? Even when you tell the truth about your family, you be trying to be nice, right? Galton was a man who applied himself widely to the various scientific fields, but most of all to theories of racial development, which he termed eugenics. Francis Galton is where you get the term eugenics from. You said his father was part of the Lunar Society, right? His father was a lunatic. Charles Darwin, in essence, was a lunatic too, at least raised lunatic. Lunatic doesn't mean that one is crazy. Lunatic means that somebody worships the moon. So even in them saying that, they still had a spiritual belief. This is spirituality as much as you guys want to. You see what I'm saying? Cats be trying to run away science. We're talking about science. Charles Darwin was a science, and this person was a scientist, and Galton was a scientist, and eugenics was a science. Eugenics is a spirit. It's spirituality. These persons worship the moon, right? And turned around and said their worship of the moon allowed them to have a mindset to come together. I'm telling you, it's a mix and match of culture. That's why we teach, don't let the iron and clay come together. It'll affect that smooth brain, Brother Dwayne. it'll make that brain smooth, boy. And I'm not talking about Brother Dwayne. Brother Dwayne is my brother. He coined the phrase, at least as far as I know, he coined the phrase smooth brain. Just to make that clear, I'm not trying to talk ill of my brother. All right, much of his work based on, so whose work? Galton, who created eugenics based off of Galton, who created eugenics based off of his cousin / brother-in-law's writings and findings, right? Romans chapter 9, verse 6, yeah, not all Israel is Israel. I'm not sure exactly what it has to do with eugenics and stuff right now, but appreciate you. And all these different things, not trying to come at you, just saying I might have missed something, I don't know. But anyways, much of his work is based off of that of Darwin. And the two converse through letters until the latter passed. And Galton's major work, Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development. Here's a book for you to do your research on, right? Not only read your Bible, it'll bless you, right? Read your Bible, Balak or Baruch, etc., right? But also read a book. There's a song. I can't say it here, but you might want to listen to it. It says, read a book, read a mother book. All right? Read. Instead of coming against. Right? Hear this, read this, because they done taught you so much other stuff, and they burning books nowadays. Read them, get them, buy them, have them on the shelf, print them out, print out PDFs, whatever you got to do. Get some books together, okay? You ready? Darwin and the two conversed through letters until the latter passed. In Galton's major work, Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development, he advocated for the gradual extermination of lower races through deliberate breeding of the higher stock. So what you guys, the breeding of slaves? By the way, there's still sex trafficking and breeding of persons too, But that being said, the breeding slave, that was supposed to be higher stock. See, the way Willie Lynch said it was, hey man, you need to drop as much good drops of white blood inside of these black persons to cause as many different shades, and let let eugenics, let Darwinism, let evolution, let science. You can just use the veil of science. Let science, let nature, let God sort them out. That's a very evolutionary saying. You think of that as a Christian saying, let God sort guys. No. What they're saying is, we've evolved higher, we better, shoot first, ask questions later, let God sort them out, because God is the one that made us evolve higher than anybody else. That's a very Eurocentric mindset. It's a mixing of many different cultures. Right? Once again, Galton, this is Charles Darwin's little cousin, who wrote the book on eugenics, right? Put a whole bunch of findings together. Him and his cousin Darwin, using evolution and eugenics, come together to be able to influence science until this day, right? And he advocated for the gradual extermination of lower races. Now, this would make sense if, once again, Charles Darwin's book, written in 1859, is called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or The Preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. And then 1871 has The Descent of Man, in which he talks about how different persons deserve death and all this stuff, and how gradually, automatically, naturally, certain persons are going to just naturally be off by others because others are better and greater and stronger and more smart than them. Okay? So later on, Galton's major work, once again, here's the name of it, Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development, right? Out of that, he advocated for the gradual extermination of lower races through deliberate breeding of the higher stock. What they did in Australia, deliberate breeding of the higher stock. What they did in Brazil, bloqueamento, the deliberate breeding through the higher stock, where persons are still arguing, Spanish-speaking persons in Spanish-speaking colonies all over the place, right? Mejor la raza, right? Deliberate breeding, right? Or deliberate breeding of the higher stock, right? You said, why do Christians block and mute criticism? You don't even want to debate. It's giving intolerance. I didn't even notice that you were there, number one, right? You see, but the moderator's running. But moderator, brother, I don't know who it is. Whoever the moderator is, whoever this person is, what is it that you're dating? And if you're just getting on the scene, if you say something that you don't realize we've been talking about, I'm going to politely just ask you to rewind and then come back, right? And matter of fact, if you want to come back and actually debate, right? I don't really do debating for persons who haven't proved that it's worth. No offense, just being honest. Apologetically speaking, it's kind of a waste of time if somebody shows that Kruger effect, including ad hominem, which is you saying things negative about me, like without actually knowing what's going on. I just literally, I just saw you for the first time. So now that you've got my attention, actually my attention, the moderators are doing well. They're doing what they're supposed to. I'm asking them, they run this, but I'm asking them permission, right? If it's all right if I talk to you for a second. So now all the stuff that you need to challenge, what is it that you need to challenge so quickly? Especially considering what we're talking about. Does it even have anything to do with what we're talking about? If so, you could literally just come back Thursday and Friday if you actually genuinely do want to not be combative, but have proper debate based off of rules, regulations, and respect for one another. You could come back later. But what is it now that the whole live session has stopped? Even though we're running out of time, we're giving you your two minutes of fame. What is it that you need to do that's going to be the thing that make me go, never heard of that? Everything that I'm talking about, everything that I'm literally giving you books on, everything that I'm saying somebody else wrote about, everything that we're saying Charles Darwin wrote, everything we're saying his cousin wrote, everything that we're going to bring up others that are talking about them wrote, everything that we talked about Carl Linnaeus, everything we're saying going back to the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 2000s, evidence we brought up in the 2020s, what we're talking about the debates that are going in the scientific community, having to deal with Komodo dragons and stuff. So you might not even know all the stuff that's going on. What is it out of all that stuff, now that you got the attention, that you need to talk about? Criticism is a system of critique. Out of what system are you critiquing me, or what within the system of what I'm saying are you ready to critique? I'm all ears. It's so amazing. You know, it's all amazing. See, and all that, right? So then the person doesn't answer. Now watch this. When I started going away from the person, this is always how it happens. Then I go away from the person, and then the person all of a sudden is ready to say all the stuff or whatever. And they won't actually answer what I asked them. And specifically for this person, what is it that I said that you're saying is wrong? That's right. Hush fell over. For certain. Okay. All right. So you had your no, you cool, brother Dwayne. You straight. So you had your opportunity. This is what I be saying. People be saying we're mean and blah blah. Okay, we give you the opportunity. Go ahead. Chat is yours. So, anyways, where was I? Let me start where I was. Sorry. Much of his work, which is Galton's, which is Darwin's cousin, most of Darwin's work, is based off of Darwin's, and that what they conversed about is passing letters back and forth. And in Galton's book, the one who coined or came up with the term eugenics, his book called Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development, he advocated for the gradual extermination of lower races through deliberate breeding of the higher stock. This is what he concluded, right? This is what he concluded. He concludes, not Kofi, right? But he concludes. The question then arises as to the way in which man can assist in the order of events. What does he say? What does he say? The question then arises as to the way in which man can assist in the order of events. I reply. So Galton basically says, so we got to ask a question. If we know this stuff is going to happen, if we know that black persons basically ain't the same as us, and if we know they're going to eventually just die off because they're not on our level, which now if you notice, so-called white persons have reversed that. Now they say, they're trying to exterminate us. We're not having enough children. Da, da, da. But it used to be, man, given enough time, we white persons are going to be, remember, Darwin taught this. White persons are going to be as far from black persons, if any of them still exist, they'll be as far from removed from them as you have black persons from gorillas. Right? That's what he said, right? So now they reverse it. But watch this. So Galton says, if that's going to happen anyway, if that's what we know is going to happen, then we need to ask ourselves, how do we assist? How do we make that happen faster? He says, he replied, this was his reply, this is his suggestion. Galton says, I reply by furthering the course of evolution. Did you know that there's a belief that you could further the cause of evolution? But I thought evolution was natural. I thought evolution was something that just happened. I thought evolution was natural selection. All right, can you rush evolution? Can you, in essence, create evolution? Man, I wish I had more time with y'all today. Right? We go over a little bit on Sundays, but I'm not going to be able to go over. With that being said, man, if y'all just caught what just happened, that's the answer to a whole bunch of stuff, ain't it? When they talk about evolution, blah, blah, nobody made evolution, nobody made man, blah, blah. Evolution just happened naturally. This man said, can't we further evolution? Can't we push it? I mean, we do this all the time anyways. I mean, we've off Native Americans. And we said that it's because they deserved it. It's manifest destiny. We killed them. But hey, it's survival of the fittest. That's what Big Cuzzo say. That's what Big Deezy say. Darwin, he be talking about that. That's what Big Cuzzo said. He been teaching me my whole life. Uh-oh. He said, the question arises as the way in which man can assist the order of events. He said, I reply by furthering the course of evolution. How do you do this? He said, he may use his intelligence to discover and expedite the changes that are necessary. To what? To expedite the changes that are necessary. In other words, if it's necessary to preserve the white race, this is what he's saying, right? Galton is saying, Darwin is saying. He's saying if it's necessary to preserve the white race, he says, then let's use our intelligence to expedite what's necessary to adapt circumstance to race and race to circumstance. Did you catch that? He just told you the truth. He said him and his cousin are leading the charge for manifest destiny, for white man's burden, for the lost cause, for doctrine of discovery, for the United States Corporation, for all its colonization, right? Come on, Brother Jay, by any means necessary. He just gave you the game. Some of y'all never heard that before. Watch this. He says, let's expedite the changes that are necessary to adapt the circumstance to race, and race to circumstance. Right? I'm sorry, let me finish this up. And his kindly sympathy will urge him to affect them mercifully. Do it quickly, do it mercifully, do it in a way to where, okay, fine, they're animals, you gotta kill them, you gotta do them, but at least do so in a kind, gentle manner. Be a Christian when you do it. Say Jesus told you to do it, and do it in love. Let the black man that you do allow in your house, treat him kindly as he has to make sure that he's your butler. Treat her kindly as she has to bend over because she is a slave, has to make sure that she carries your child. That won't even be considered to be your child, and won't even be considered to be anything more than lifeless. And if you stomp your own child out, who cares? But do so with grace. The one who wrote, I always forget his name. I'm sorry, I always forget his name. Who's the one who wrote Amazing Grace? Minister, whatever. Who said, I sinned with a high head. In other words, he was R-wording women when they came over their ship. But he did so with dignity. Hey, Patrick, you even continue in the conversation. You don't even know. Thank you so much for just proving that I'm correct. Right? That existence of that comment does nothing but prove it. I appreciate you. I don't think trolls get it by now. We rejoice and be exceeding glad when they come against us that they came against the prophets. But whoever the cat is, minister, whatever, that wrote Amazing Grace, he said the same thing. We can do whatever we want to these folk. They're going to die off anyways. Darwin taught us this. Darwin taught us this. Galton taught us this. Let's do whatever we do. Let's expedite it. But just be kind and gentle. And by the way, I'm going to read what he said again, this one part, which persons don't like, because they say we're the ones who came up with this. Oh, I'm sorry. They're the ones that said we came up with it. I'm going to read this one part again. He says, we need to make sure that what? That we adapt, we do everything necessary. We expedite all the changes that are necessary to adapt race, right? And to adapt race to circumstance and circumstance. What does that mean, beloved? What is he telling us there? He's saying we need to do everything in our power as quickly as possible to make sure that every time somebody sees a circumstance, they can attach it to what somebody's species or somebody's race is. And every time that they see race or species or color, they can adapt it to their circumstance. That wasn't our creation. That was the racism. That was the racist white supremacists. How you doing, Freedom D? Right? Did you catch that? Galton said, the father of eugenics, the brother-in-law / cousin of Charles Darwin, said, if we're going to do this correctly, if we're going to do what what Charles Darwin's father / uncle taught, which should really show you how crazy some of this stuff is and how crazy they are. He said, if we're going to do this properly, we got to make sure that we attach race to every circumstance and circumstance to every race. So if you see a black person, you should automatically assume that they are wicked, that 13% of the population commits 50% of the crime, that their black women stink, that they all want BBLs, that they all are disrespectful, that they can't read at the level that you do, that if they have an opportunity to get something, it's because they're DEI, right? If we bring that back to even remember what Lyndon B. Johnson said, we talked about that earlier. So Lyndon B. Johnson said, if you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. This is an evolutionary mindset. This is a eugenics mindset. And once again, to make it work against so-called black persons, you have to make it work against so-called white persons. Yeah, that's how you get to a place where black women don't feel pain. Coming to the hospital, she's screaming, she's doing all that. Man, you're doing too much. Matter of fact, sisters, can I just say something? Be careful. Brothers too, be careful. We don't keep the curse going, because when they do it to us, you turn around and do it to your children sometimes. Sometimes that baby is crying because they're in pain. I just need to say that. Somebody need to hear that. Be careful. Some of you are attaching every circumstance to race and every race to circumstance. That baby boy, that baby girl might be hurt. They're not always playing. Yeah, sometimes they playing, sometimes they're trying to get attention, but they might actually be hurt. And it's Darwinism, it's eugenics, right? By Galton, things like that. Be careful. We are thinking about ourselves like that and treating these babies like that. We'll say, no excuses in my house, but then you'll go work for the so-called white man, and you give him every excuse. Right? If they can be humanized, so can your baby. Whoever that's for is for you. Holy Spirit just put that on me. I did not mean to even say that. I just got to be obedient. Somebody, whoever needs to hear that, that's for you. Let's keep on going. All right. Galton himself, right? Galton himself attempted to further the course of evolution. What did he do? To further the course. That means that they're creating this thing called evolution, furthering the course. That's what they're saying. You're getting the game here. For those of you, when you talk to somebody now, ask them, how did Galton say that we're going to make sure we further evolution? Right? Ask them, how did Charles Darwin talk about evolution and talk about how he hated black persons and calling them the N-word and stuff? Ask them this. Their stuff starts to fall apart. They don't even know it. Right? Galton himself attempted to further the course of evolution through a variety of means and methods. Most outrageously, he proposed colonizing Africa with Chinese. By the way, are Chinese persons still? You see what I'm saying? Like persons saying, but if you go to, if you don't know where I'm headed, if you go to Africa right now, go to Ghana, go to Nigeria, go to Sudan, go to Ethiopia, go to Egypt, all these different places. See how much Chinese stuff is still there, and watch this. Go and do some research and see how many Chinese persons have actually read Darwin's stuff and said, yeah, that makes sense. We should go into Africa. See, Read a book, read a mother and book. Okay, right? Some of y'all know that song, right? You need to read. You need to go back and hear it again. I'm sorry, I know they cussing it, and I'm just saying some of y'all need to hear that because if you would go and read, you would stop arguing this stuff. All right, here we go. Galton himself attempted to further the course of evolution through a variety of means and methods. Most outrageously, he proposed colonizing Africa with Chinese in hopes that the latter would breed out the former. If we put enough Chinese persons there, they'll breed the Africans out, extinguishing the inhabitants of that continent entirely. We won't have to worry about them again. Where what? Charles Darwin, his big cousin, big bro, big Duncan. If you know about Trey Rags, the big Duncan, right? Big Duncan said, we got to get rid of them Chinese folk. I'm sorry, them African folk. They're going to leave anyways. They're going to automatically, it's a natural selection. They're going to be bred out anyways. His little cousin come to him and say, yo, I'm with you, big cousin. I'm with you, big homie. Matter of fact, forget all that. We're going to expedite it. We're going to speed it up. How can we get it to happen? It's going to happen anyways. We might as well just speed it up then. Just like somebody said earlier, somebody came on here talking about science always gets us to the same place. Yeah, it does. If racism, white supremacy, and you keep making theory after theory after theory to cover up the fact that you have never been able to prove any of this stuff. Right? So he said we're going to put Chinese and Africans trying to get them to outbreed the Africans. And then eventually, they'll go away. Which doesn't make sense, because once again, these are non-scientists. You can call them scientists. Charles Darwin is not a scientist. He doesn't know how this works. So you have a non-scientist in Charles Darwin who is basically heavily influenced his cousin / brother-in-law. And his cousin / brother-in-law looks up to him and says, you know what, big bro? I got you. I'm going to further what you're saying. But if a whole bunch of so-called black persons and a whole bunch of so-called, if you're talking about Africans even specifically, even though that's a very diverse thing, they don't know what they're talking about. But let's just say all Africans are dark, dark, because that's what they think it is. All Africans are dark, stupid persons. That's what they teach them. If that's your belief system, you don't even know how the dominant gene works, where even if, yes, you might get some lighter persons who are closer to Asian, you don't even know that so-called Asian persons, by the way, I'm talking about coming from Chinese scientists, Japanese scientists, and Korean scientists who agree on this. 8 so-called Asian persons or Asiatic persons that you think about, because Asian is more diverse than what you think too, but so-called Asian persons come from so-called African persons. But Chinese persons read this and said, hey, yeah, we should get a head start on that too. We with you. Because it affects more than just one region or just only white persons. Everybody tries to keep up for this. Right? With so much having been done by Darwin, which was expounded upon by Galton. In other words, was Darwin coming up with what you guys think evolution means, and then his cousin coming up behind that with what eugenics is, it should come as no surprise that the Southern apologists and white supremacists in America readily took to the writings of the two cousins as certain vindication of their position. One such piece of writing, not even in the 1800s anymore, not thousands of years ago, not hundreds of years, not 400 years ago, right? Watch this. One such piece of writing out of the many which exist is the 1905 essay, right? The 1905 essay by Benjamin K. Hayes entitled Natural Selection and the Race Problem. You need to add that to your reading. Natural Selection and the Race Problem. After breaking down the way Darwin's theory applies to humans, Hayes turns his attention to the American situation and the black man. What of him? Now he started already. And the black man. What of him? Right? Maybe I should speak differently on it because he's dignified, right? And the black man. What of him? As he was known to the ancient Egyptians, to the Greek, and to the Roman, even so he is found in his African home today. At the dawn of history, he was fully developed. And during the past 3,000 years, he has not made one step of progress. Wow. Independently, he has shown no power to advance. The superiority of the American Negro to his African brother, who is savage and cannibal, is due to slavery. It could have been acquired in no other way. Men who ascribe the base characteristics of the Negro to slavery show a short-sightedness that is pitiable. The present attainment of the American Negro has been solely the result of his close personal contact with white men. I'm going to keep going. He's not finished yet. He's not finished yet. Let him finish. Let him finish. Okay, he ain't finished yet. Watch this. Let's keep on going. Nor should it be forgotten that most of the leaders in the Negro race are men with Anglo-Saxon blood in their veins, who partake more of their Caucasian, of their Caucasian than of their Ethiopian lineage. Some of these are splendid men who are making heroic efforts to elevate the Negro race. Others of mixed blood are vicious and turbulent. These are the men who create trouble. Left to itself, a Negro population lapses into barbarism. The Negro has been domesticated. The Negro has been what? The Negro has been domesticated. But the question is, will he ever become an integral part of Anglo-American civilization? The black man has never been a competitor, but has always been subservient to the white race. And just so long as he remains subservient, his position is secure. And just so soon as he becomes a competitor, his fate is sealed. Ooh. That's gangster right there. The way he ended that, I ain't gonna hold you, right? That's about as racist as it gets, but I ain't gonna hold you. That ending right there, that dismount, that was gangster. That was gangster, though. It was 11-11, baby. You see it? Thank y'all. Right? That was gangster. Now, what is this man saying? And by the way, he's basing this off of the teachings of Darwin and off of the teachings of Galvin, Darwin's cousin, the one who started eugenics. So he takes this in 1905. So the book was written 1859, How to Preserve the Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, right? The Origin of Species, that's what that book was. 1871, you have the book written on, hey, this is how they operate, this is who should have sex with each other, this is who should mate with each other, anything else is an abomination. Then his cousin comes behind that and writes his books to help eugenics come about. This guy takes it now in 1905 and says, I'm going to show you Americans this is how we're supposed to operate. So basically, hey, I like what the English persons did with this. I like what's happening with our brethren and how they're colonizing. I'm going to show you how we're going to do it over here in America. And he writes this, and when he writes this excerpt that we're seeing, he's basically saying the same thing that they say today. He says, hey, all they talk about is this and that, but you got to understand, have you seen, look, this is what he says. I'm not even making anything up, right? If anybody, I just read it. You can read it on your own. But I just read what he said. You tell me if I'm lying based off of what he said. And this is what they say today. He said, man, you know what? Everybody knew about black persons from the time of Egypt. He says the Egyptians knew them and the Greeks knew them because he doesn't even think Egyptians could be Kemetic. Once again, these people are supposed to be historians and scientists. They don't know what they're talking about. They're stupid. Yeah, by the way, well, the term white man exists by this point, right? But there is no such thing as a white person. But the term white person by now, does exist, right? But there was no such thing. There's no such color as white. That being said, right, this so-called white man is saying, so-called great white civilizations knew about so-called black persons all the time. All of these black persons in Africa, he doesn't think about anybody else being dark anywhere else, including his own people. Right? That being said, he goes, yeah, they did all this and blah, blah, and all that. Or they've been around. And he said, and they got a head start. He said at the beginning, they were greater. His mindset is actually, in the beginning when they came about, they were better than everybody else. Or he's leaving the door open really for saying, hey, when they first came about, we might have even evolved from them. So they were first. He's leaving the door open for whichever interpretation you want to use. But watch this. So he says, so now you got this guy in 1905, and he says, yeah, so they were there. He says, and they've been around for thousands of years, and the whole world knew about them, and yet they have never improved themselves. They were just great in the beginning, as far as being, they were better than everybody else. They were spear chuckers. That's what they call you, They were N-words. They were N-word females, N-word males. They were nothing. When they were free, they were spear chuckers. They could hunt, they could run, they could stay in the sun. They beat us in the evolutionary thing as far as in the beginning. They were better than us, yeah, for sure. But then he says over the next 1,000 years, all these persons never saw any value in them. Meanwhile, here comes Alexander the Great. Meanwhile, here comes Cleopatra, here comes the Ptolemaic dynasty. Meanwhile, here come, I want to be very loose and not so broad because I know a certain one, but who we now call the Arabs, right? Arabic persons who come over and do things or whatever. But nobody saw any value. By the way, meanwhile, he says everybody knew what's going on in Africa and Ethiopia and Kemet and all these places. And even though they would send persons from Greece to learn from us, there is no Aristotle if they don't get sent down to learn from our people down there. That being said, he says, but they were okay, but everybody else advanced. The so-called white civilization advanced, and they never advanced. He's telling you that they didn't evolve enough to. See, they don't ever say that. They just say, you're not as great. They forgot part of the sort because they're not taught that part either. They forgot the reason why they say that is that, hey, you guys had your chance. You had kingdoms. Why are you mad that we took over you? Why couldn't you just defeat us? Why couldn't you defend yourself? They don't want to admit to you, oh yeah, the reason they say that is because supposedly you evolved. Or they evolved and you never did. Right? You're the worst version of human. So even when they say, yeah, Africans came first, they're still using the same thought process. This is what I'm saying. You gotta be careful about these persons saying, oh no, we're against Darwin and Darwin was racist, blah, blah, this and that. Until it's like, okay, fine. So tell me then why are you still using his rhetoric? But let's keep on going. He then says stuff like what? He says, yeah, matter of fact, all these persons talking all this stuff, but if it wasn't for us, the white man, this is what he said. If the white race had never enslaved the black race, they wouldn't be where they are. He said, matter of fact, the thing these Negroes, these African Americans don't want to tell you is that these African Americans, they wouldn't be nothing without us. Matter of fact, most of them aren't even African at all anyways. They're not even really African American. Not only are they not from there, but they don't have to say, but they actually have our blood in them. That's what made them better. And a lot of them are doing well. They're trying to show that the Negro race can do well. And there's a lot of mixed mongrels around here that don't understand that and are trying to be black, and they're actually causing issues. But they must understand it. And then he says at the end of it, he says the question really that we should pose to ourselves is, will the African American who is only doing well because we say so and because we taught him and we gave him guidance, right? He says the only question that we really should look at is, are they going to fall in line with Anglo-American values? Or are we going to have to take them out? I'm going to read the end of it again, just in case you missed it, because you might be thinking I'm making this stuff up. But this is, once again, these are books back to back to back. One written in 1859, one written in 1871, one written in 1905. We're talking about 2 generations, right? So let's look at this once again. He says, the end of it, he says, left to itself, a Negro population lapses into barbarism. The Negro has been domesticated. That means a chattel slavery, domesticated, right? But the question is, will he ever become an integral part of Anglo-American civilization? The black man has never been a competitor, so he's not even on our level. He's never been a competitor, but has always been subservient to the white race. And just so long as he remains subservient, his position is secure. So as long as he don't rise up, we'll let you exist, right? And just so soon as he becomes a competitor, his fate is sealed. Soon as you think that it's time for you to compete with us, we gotta take you out. Soon as you think that you should be equal to us, look at what happened to MLK. Soon as you think that you should have the right to sue us, look at what happened to Martin Luther King. Soon as you think that you have the right to become a nation in the diaspora, and like we call just all of us white, you might start calling all of yourselves black. Look what happened to Marcus Garvey. Soon as you think that you can go ahead and do something with wealth and whatever, we'll make you look crazy like Cloud Anderson. Soon as you want to start preaching the truth in your church, we'll say, well, you might have a big church, but you'll never do anything with it, Fred Price. As soon as you start talking about, you see what I'm saying? As soon as you say you're going to teach persons about eating well and doing what they're supposed to, look at what happens to Dr. Sebi and Dr. Leah Africa. Should we keep going on and on and on? As soon as you start doing after-school programs for children, we'll shoot you like a dog. Ask what happened to the Black Panthers. Ask them. That's what they did. They were feeding children. They were working with so-called white persons in hospitals to make sure that all persons could have health care. You wouldn't have health care the way it is, and you wouldn't have school lunches and school breakfast if it wasn't for the Black Panther Party. Right? It's evolution that teaches that. Right? Darwin said this, or I'm sorry, excuse me. The Darwinian belief system, right, says this in Galton, the creator of eugenics, Darwin's cousin, says this. He says, the weak has ever been dominated by the strong. And where the strong cannot control, it will destroy. This is an excuse to be able to kill. As long as a weaker race will render service, it will be protected by the stronger. As long as y'all are slaves. So this is the person that we had just read that long thing from 1905. Now we're backtracking to the person that he got this from. This is where he got it from. It says, but whenever and wherever the weaker becomes a competitor of the stronger, the struggle for existence will be brief, and the relentless hand of natural selection will place the weaker in the list of those that were numbered with the past. That's why Charles Darwin's book, written in 1859, is called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. But natural selection has always been code for what? For the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. You see that? We only got to work that hard. Just let them speak. Clearly, the work of Darwin and his successors lead, right? Clearly, the work of Darwin and his successors lead toward racist and destructive conclusions which have been used since their inception to justify oppression. Southern slaveholders and their later apologists used Darwinism as a balm for their consciousness, or their consciences, vindicating their actions with the words of the father of evolution. All we had to do is just say what Daddy said. You know, Daddy said that. Daddy taught us that. Charles Darwin taught us this stuff. If he said it, then it's gospel, so to speak, right? It's that God spell. That's their God. That's who they worship. If a scientist says something that is racist, it's intelligent. Why? I mean, can God be dumb? Now, I don't worship God. I worship other kind. But I'm saying that's what they do, right? That's in essence what the scientists are saying. Remember we talked about the religion of science on Friday? That's in essence what they're saying. Can our gods be dumb? Can they be stupid? Could they be wrong? Could these persons that we worship be wrong in any way, shape, or form? All we're doing is telling you who we worship, what they said. Why would you not bow down to it? Why would you not be thankful? Why would you not sing praises unto it? Why would you not learn in school? Why would you not be excited that we would share this knowledge with your children? To allow them to understand their place. It's only the natural order. Remember, we just told you how natural selection works and how we can expedite it. If you don't get in line with racism, white supremacy, and make sure that you recognize you are the weaker race, and any time you try to become competition, right? Natural selection says that we should expedite it, and eugenics says that we have every right to use every tool of our experience in our position to ensure that every time somebody looks at you, they attach your race to your circumstance and your circumstance to your race. And do you not know that we're in control of your circumstance, right? But those of us who walk circumspectly in the kingdom, nobody's in control of our circumstance except the Most High. This is what we got to learn. We got to learn all these things. Yes, fine. Now that you know it, recognize that you cannot move like them. You keep trying to move like them and talk like them and act like them and make excuses for this stuff. And when I say them, I mean anybody who backs up racism, white supremacy, because as I said before, some of the worst perpetrators of this are the persons that look like you. So I'm not here to say just because you're light skinned, you're dark skinned, you're white, you got locks, you don't have locks, you got long hair, you got short hair. I'm not doing that. I'm saying anybody who's against evil, let's be against it. And ultimately, for real, anybody who's in the kingdom, we need to let the word speak for itself. Right? These jokers have spoken for themselves. They tell you what they believe. We know what lunatic means. We know what the father of Darwin is. We know who Darwin's cousin is. We know who this person is who's writing this stuff. We know who made these IQ tests. At some point, right, we have to make a decision and say they are no longer our standard. Now, I'm sorry to Brother TJ. I didn't even notice. I didn't even see you over there. I apologize. On the platform. Thank you for being on all the different platforms today. I really appreciate you. We honor you. We hope that you're doing well. We hope that you continue to do well. Thank you for joining us, whether you joined us on the podcast, came over from Clapper, or came on Clapper, came over from IG. If you are with us on YouTube, Facebook, Clapper, TikTok, everybody, Darn, everybody, we appreciate you so much. Keep us in prayer as we continue our travels. And hopefully you guys enjoy your time, enjoy your day, enjoy your families, squeeze those ones that you love. Take time out. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here, but that's why I say reversing the curse means revisiting the lie. And sometimes the lies are ugly, but the curses are even worse. You hear what I'm saying? The lies are ugly, the curses are even worse. And we've learned how to live with curses and just be like, well, just because I'm cursed, this is what it's supposed to be. That's the only way I know how to function. Learn how to function greater than. I didn't know how to function outside of curses either, but at some point I can walk in generational blessings, or I can walk in generational curses, but it's a choice. That part is a choice. Slavery, not a choice. All that stuff they say. But coming out of it, now that you know, see, look, if you're born into slavery, that wasn't your fault. But if you have a chance to escape, and the Most High says your escape is 100% guaranteed, that's on you, right? And yeah, you might have to go over troubled water, but there's a bridge. You see what I'm saying? Right? That lie that they told you, it was gangsters, still is. And by the way, it belongs to the biggest gangsters on the earth. Those who are racist and white supremacy is the biggest gang to ever exist. Matter of fact, it's so big that they can turn your gang into a gang and tell you that it's always been bad. Remember, Bloods and Crips weren't even, well, they were gangs, but gangs used to be persons that were trying to make sure that they helped the community. Matter of fact, even if you go back, all that stuff they be talking about, the gangs of New York and stuff like that, you know, all those gangs too, they started off as trying to make sure that they helped their communities. But over time, you put police officers in there, you put the Bureau of Investigation in there, that becomes the Federal Bureau of Investigation, you put CIA in there, you put the informants in there, you start making it really tough on these persons, whatever, only thing they got left is to try and survive. But you don't have to survive, you can thrive. So prayerfully the message reaches you well. If you want to come over to TikTok and join us for a quick shout out today, we thank you for doing so. We'll get ready to do that over here. And if you don't know how the shout out works, just come over to TikTok or be patient with us. We'll set that up in a little bit. And you'll be able to see how that works. Also, too, if you are looking for, if you are somebody who's looking for the notes, as I was saying, you can go to Patreon and get them. If you do want them outside of that, I can try to send it to you at a later time and date, but can't guarantee when. Those of you who are still waiting on the calendars and stuff, we have to change the way that the link works. So hopefully that'll be taken care of in a few. And then those of you who are still waiting, we'll get your stuff. And then, if you're still waiting for a physical one, we'll tell you how that'll work in January. But if you like your virtual calendar, those are $15 donation. Thank you for those who are doing the 5 to 10 still. And really at this point, I'm just going to say thank you for those that are giving. You guys know the things that we're doing. We appreciate you. If you'd like to give donations as well, we're really helping out with the children that are in Africa now. We're trying to make sure that we send something weekly to our sister Angela in Pennsylvania that goes back and forth to Rwanda and everything. So if we can, we want to be a blessing to them if you're able to. We're going to be doing that for a few months at least, probably until the middle of next year. And be a blessing upon them like we were in the times past, so like the children of Haiti and the children of Ghana and some other stuff like that. So if you're able to help out with that and you'd like to send something for them, just make sure that it's actually said that that's what the donation is for, so we know to make sure that they get it. Otherwise, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for any like, share, subscriptions, hit the notification tab. If you give any kind of donation of any way, including yes, time, talent, effort, energy, and yes, even money. We thank you guys who give that to help us, because for us it's not just virtual, it's reality. Prayerfully this helps your mindset on certain things. It'll help you to see some of these things different. It'll help you to see some of these patterns, and it will remind you again that we need to come out of this system as soon as possible and love on each other, protect each other, invest in each other, and grow each other. In the name of Yahashua, Hashem Yechava, Hashem Amen. So love you all. We give honor and praise to the Most High. We give our praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya. We thank everybody who was on for Brothers in Black last night, to the ministerial staff, moderators, SOC, Lottie Dyer, everybody. Love you much. Sisters, don't forget, Women in Red is going to be coming up at the end of the month. Those in England, don't forget, we're going to try and start meeting up again this Saturday coming up, or whatever time and date that you guys say is acceptable. And also meet everybody else around the world. We're going to try and have you guys on at the same time. I'm sorry if that's a little difficult for you where you are, but we're just going to have to figure it out. But love you guys. Thank you so much. We honor you. We appreciate you. And we hope that all is well. And remember, as always, beloved, that you are loved, you're necessary, you're majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom. Take care. Peace. Thank you so much.